5 Theatrical Trouble. Past Sins. By Pen Stroke. Assisted by Batty Gloom. Equals 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 equals. Chapter 5. Theatrical Trouble. Equals 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 equals. It had been nearly a week since Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon's prank had gone wrong, and Nyx was back at school. It was recess, and, while the rest of her classmates were out enjoying a large game of hoofball, Nyx was by herself. She was sitting on the swing, moving, at most, 2 inches back and forth as she stared at the ground and tried her best to keep herself from crying. She didn't want to be at school, and, the first morning after she had been brought back from the Everfree Forest, she had just wanted to stay at the library. She wanted to stay where it was safe and, maybe more importantly, away from Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. Yet, during the first few days after the forest incident, things were different at the library. Twilight had been avoiding her. She was trying to hide it, had tried to tell Nyx that she was just imagining things, but Nyx knew things were different. Twilight kept looking at her with this weird expression, like she was looking through her and expecting to find some monster. It was that strange look alone that made Nyx finally agree to go back to school. But school was no better. Over the few days she had been back, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had become unbearable. Diamond's father, Filthy Rich, had grounded her for what she did, and now she was doing everything in her power to get back at Nyx. They had spread nasty rumors around the school, picked on Nyx openly, and even tried to frame her for putting a tack on Cheerilee's desk chair. Thankfully, Cheerilee had seen through their ruse. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon were now missing recess, sitting at their desks as punishment for the tack. It gave Nyx her first peaceful recess in days, though it did little to raise her spirits. She still felt horrible. She had wanted to hurt Twilight sometime in the past. She didn't know when or why, but the fact remained, and she knew it was because of that fact that Twilight kept watching her with that strange, almost scared look in her eyes. How could she have ever wanted to hurt Twilight? She was such a nice pony. It was Twilight who had found her in the forest, had taken her in her home, and had been taking care of her. It was Twilight who helped her catch up in school and read her bedtime stories. How could she want to hurt some pony who was willing to do all that? Hey, Nyx, how are you doing? Nyx jumped a little. She hadn't noticed that Sumpony had come up beside her and quickly looked up, fearing Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had been released from their no-recess punishment by Cheerilee. Yet, instead of the school bullies, Nyx saw the faces of her classmates and friends. Apple Bloom and Twist were near the swing, with Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle just behind them. I'm okay, Nyx lied before she looked back down at the ground. You don't sound okay, Twist pointed out. Scootaloo nodded her head. Yeah, and you don't look that good either. Are you sick? 'Cause you look like you're about to throw up. Nyx winced at those words, flattened her ears against her head, and turned away. At the same time, Apple Bloom glared over her shoulder at Scootaloo and whispered, You're not helpin'. But I didn't mean, Scootaloo tried to protest, only to find Sweetie Belle pushing her away. Come on, let's just let Apple Bloom and Twist talk to her. But I was just making a joke to make her laugh. I didn't mean. Scootaloo's voice faded as she was led away from the swing set by Sweetie Belle. That left Apple Bloom and Twist standing beside Nyx, and both waited for Scootaloo to be well out of earshot before they looked back to Nyx. You know she didn't mean it like that, right? Apple Bloom asked. Nyx nodded her head but did not look up at her friends. Yeah, I know. So, why are you sad, Nyx? Twist asked. Is it because Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon tried to get you in trouble? No, it's not that. You know, my sister says a pony always feels better when they tell the truth, especially when something's bothering them, Apple Bloom said before putting on a smile. Well, I guess, Nyx began before she sniffled and rubbed her hoof across her nose. But can you two keep this a secret? Of course, Apple Bloom assured. And you promise not to tell any pony else. Cross my heart, hope to fly, stick a cupcake in my eye, Apple Bloom rattled off. What was that? Twist asked, confused by Apple Bloom's odd movements and rhymes. It's a Pinkie Pie promise. Twist arched an eyebrow. There's a promise named after Pinkie Pie. Yep. It's a promise between friends that you have to keep forever. Forever. Twist echoed. Forever. Nyx, Apple Bloom, and Twist jumped and turned to look towards the path that ran alongside the school. Standing on the other side of the fence that surrounded the playground was Pinkie Pie, glaring seriously at the 3 fillies. She was carrying a tray of cupcakes on her back, and her saddlebags were loaded down with other assorted goodies. Hey, Pinkie Pie, Apple Bloom said, giving the Earth Pony a weak wave. The serious expression on Pinkie Pie's face quickly shifted back to its normal, cheerful nature. Hey, girls. I was just taking some sweets to a party. Well, I'd better get going. You have fun. Okay, see ya, Apple Bloom replied. The three watched Pinkie Pie bounce down the path, and, only when they were sure Pinkie Pie was out of earshot did Twist say something. That was weird. It's Pinkie Pie being Pinkie Pie, that's just how she is, Apple Bloom assured Twist. Still, you have to keep a Pinkie Pie promise, since breaking one makes you lose a friend's trust, and losing a friend's trust is the fastest way to lose a friend forever. FOOOREVVR. The three fillies jumped again and turned once more to see Pinkie Pie. She was standing a long way down the path, almost out of sight of the school. At the moment she was staring down the three fillies as if she was able to hear their conversation despite the distance. Her hardened gaze drifted between each one like she was peering into their very souls. Yet, just as quickly as she had spoken out, Pinkie Pie returned to her normal perky nature, turning and bouncing around a bend in the path as she continued on her task of delivering food for a party. If it's okay with you, Apple Bloom, I think I'll just use a normal promise, Twist said. Apple Bloom nodded and instead focused her attention back on Nix. So, what did you want to tell us? Well, when I was in the forest, I remembered things, and, in some of those memories, I wanted to hurt Twilight. Why would you want to hurt Twilight? Twist asked. I don't know, Nix half blubbered, half shouted at the ground as tears formed in the corners of her eyes. But I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I don't know why. And I don't want to hurt Twilight because she's so nice, but. Whoa, easy, Nix, Apple Bloom said, seeing her friend start to hyperventilate. Is that why you've been so sad, because you thought you wanted to hurt Twilight? Nix nodded, trying to dry her eyes. I'm not even sure when it happened or why, but I remember wanting to hurt her. We were both standing in some old castle ruins, and I was really tall, and when I spoke, my voice was all strange, but I remember wanting to hurt her, and. Are ya sure you weren't just dreamin'? Apple Bloom asked. Daydreaming, Nix echoed, looking up at Apple Bloom. She sniffled, rubbed her nose, and adjusted her glasses, which had fallen down a little. Yeah, dreamin'. I mean, Twilight said you were way out in the Everfree forest. Maybe you just got tired, passed out, and dreamed the whole thing up. You just didn't know it 'cause of how scared you were. I mean, you ain't exactly taller than Twilight, are ya? Well, no, but even if it was just a dream, I still feel bad about it. Have you told Twilight about this? Twist asked. Yes. And did you apologize? Nix sniffed and nodded. Yes, I apologized, and she said it was all right. Well then why are you worryin' about it, you silly filly? Apple Bloom asked, smiling gently. Like you said, you don't really want to hurt Twilight, and it sounds like she's already forgiven you. As my big sister would say, it's all water under the bridge now. What does a bridge have to do with any of this? Twist asked. It's an expression. Twist cocked her head to one side. What does it mean? Well, it kind of, look, I don't know for sure, but I know it does mean something like once you've apologized for doing something and some pony has forgiven you, then it's okay just to forget about it. Oh, so since Twilight's forgiven Nix for thinking she ever wanted to hurt her, they can both just forget about it and go back to being happy. Exactly, Apple Bloom said with a smile. But, I don't think Twilight has forgotten about it. She keeps looking at me funny, almost like she's scared of me. And what if it wasn't a dream? What if I wanted to hurt Twilight for real? What if I want to hurt her again? I don't want to hurt her. Okay, we're going in circles. Time for an apple family remedy, Apple Bloom said before she stepped behind Nix. Wait, what are you? Whoa. Nix went wide-eyed as she sailed forward. Apple Bloom had put all of her apple bucking practice to use by turning and bucking the swing. The buck sent Nix rocketing skyward, her purple mane flowing behind her as she clung tightly to the chains. The swing had reached its peak and begun swooping back when Nix finally realized what had happened. Apple Bloom stepped out of the way before Nix swung back. She joined Twist, and, together, the pair couldn't help but laugh at Nix's panicked face. Apple Bloom lifted a hoof to her mouth and shouted, Come on, go higher. Yeah, higher, Twist added in her nasally tone. Nix gulped. She was already swinging higher than she ever had before, but Twist and Apple Bloom's cheers filled her head. Taking a deep breath, Nix began to throw her weight into the swing, causing it to travel higher and higher. Eventually, she reached the point where the swing began to hang loose at the top of its arc, a few moments of free fall before the chains snapped taut again. Nix swung back and forth a number of times before her courage ran out, and she let the swing slow down. When she did stop, she was smiling and laughing along with Apple Bloom and Twist, who quickly moved up beside her. See, the Apple family remedy works every time. What's the remedy? Swinging on a swing? Nix asked. No, having fun. Nothing can get a pony feeling better like having a little fun. Now scooch over. It's my turn, Apple Bloom said. Nix gladly relinquished the swing, and, once Apple Bloom was seated, she used her magic to give it a push. Soon, Apple Bloom was swinging high while Twist and Nix cheered her on. Apple Bloom's laughter filled the air and drew Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo back over. The quintet of fillies would spend the rest of recess taking turns on the swing, challenging one another to go higher than they ever had before. Tilda tilde tilde. Twilight smiled as she looked at the calendar on the wall, striking off another day. Time had flown, as it often did, and it had been about a month and a half since Nix's arrival. And, all things considered, Twilight was happy with how Nix was doing. Nix was caught up in school, so now she could spend afternoons outside playing with friends instead of stuck in extra lessons. There were, however, still days where Nix chose to come back to the library, wanting Twilight to teach her more about something she had learned in school. Sometimes her curiosity was simply insatiable. School itself had been going better as well. After Twilight's confrontation with Diamond Tiara's parents and a few other altercations between the fillies at school, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon started going to Cheerilee's afternoon class, which in turn let 2 other students move to the morning class. Nix hadn't really had a chance to meet or talk to Dinky Doo or Pipsqueak, but Twilight was just happy with the fact that Nix didn't have to deal with Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon on a daily basis anymore. Moving away from the calendar, Twilight began to shuffle and clean up the library. Spike was over at Rarity's place helping her with a dress, Aloysius was asleep, and Nix was at school. All in all, it gave Twilight a quiet morning to clean up the mess caused by her usual study practices. After popping a small treat to Pee-wee, whose nest was on the windowsill at the moment, Twilight went about stacking books on the shelves. As she did, she glanced at the titles. After living in the library for over 2 years, she had read most of the collection. There were, of course, some books she hadn't cracked open. Some books had been skipped by choice, and she was sure there were a few that had slipped under her radar. All the books Twilight put away were ones she had read, but she couldn't stop herself from lingering on the last book. It was brown with golden clasps on the corners and a gold unicorn on the cover. It was a book of folklore, old stories from Equestria's past, and it was the book that contained the legend of Nightmare Moon and the prophecy of her return. Without even thinking about it, Twilight opened the book and quickly turned to the folktale in question. Her eyes glanced over the beautiful illustrations before moving to the first lines of the story. Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria, there were 2 regal sisters who ruled together and created harmony for all the land. To do this, the eldest. I'm home. Twilight smiled and set the book down on the reading table as Nix came scampering into the library and up to her. Hey there, Nix. How was school today? Great, Nix chirped. Cheerilee told us that we're going to be putting on a play. Really? Yep. She says that every spring the school puts on a play for the Ponyville Spring Festival. It's this really cool thing where a bunch of musicians, artists, and entertainers come to Ponyville and every pony has a lot of fun. That's right, the Spring Festival is coming up soon, isn't it? Twilight lifted a hoof to her chin and smiled as she recalled a book she had read on the subject. If I remember correctly, it was started by a traveling group of musicians that came to Ponyville every year around this time as they toured Equestria. Eventually, other musicians started showing up at the same time, and, after a few years, it grew into the festival it is today. Yeah, that's what Cheerilee told us, Nix confirmed as she took off her saddlebags. Cheerilee also said that we can pick what the play will be about and that we'll all have something to do. Well, doesn't that sound fun? Do you have any ideas? I was kind of hoping I'd find a good story in one of the library books, Nix sheepishly admitted. Twilight smiled and gave an approving nod. That's a great idea. Books have some of the best stories, but remember that it's meant to be a school play. Try to pick a story that's short and every pony in your class will like. Okay, Nix agreed. She was going to ask for Twilight's help in picking out a story, but before she could, Applejack burst in through the library door. Twee, there you are. I need your help with something fierce. What's wrong, Applejack? Some nasty plant showed up in Sweet Apple Acres. It's a vine and it's starting to grow up around some of the trees. You got any books in here that can tell us what it is? Twilight nodded and, with her magic, grabbed a number of phytopathology books from the shelves. She stuffed the tomes into her saddlebags and settled the bags onto her back before she looked over her shoulder at Nix. I've got to go help Applejack. Will you be okay by yourself for a little while? Sure, I'll just try and find a story for my school play. Twilight nodded while she tightened the straps on her bags. Good. Now, I'll be back soon, but if you need help, Spike is at Rarity's and Aloysius is asleep upstairs. Okay, Twilight. Thanks again, Twee, Applejack said as she and Twilight galloped out the door. I don't know what that nasty plant is, but I know it ain't good for my apple trees. Twilight pulled the library door shut as she and Applejack left, leaving Nyx to her studies. Nyx looked about the room for a few minutes, mindlessly skimming the books on the shelves for something that looked like a storybook until she took notice of one book that was left sitting out. Nyx approached the book and was soon drawn in by its beautiful illustrations. She flipped through the pages, reading the titles of the stories. Some of them Twilight had told her as bedtime stories, but others she hadn't heard before. One in particular caught her attention, and she eagerly began to read. Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria, there were two regal sisters who ruled together and created harmony for all the land. To do this, the eldest. Tilda. So, do you know what the play is supposed to be about? Twilight asked as she and Rarity walked in the direction of the Ponyville Elementary School. The pair of unicorns had volunteered to help the students prepare the show, though all the actual work was going to be done by the fillies and colts. It was a chance for the students to find their cutie marks, after all. The two mares were going to be there to not only help with things the students could not manage but also to help cheerily keep all the energetic students on task. I've asked Sweetie Belle, but she's refused to tell me. She says we'll find out today, Rarity answered Twilight. She seems particularly excited, though. Is she going to be acting in the play or is she helping some other way? My sister wanted to help with the costumes. But, well, I may have mentioned in passing to Cheerily that Sweetie Belle was the one that made the costumes for the Crusaders' appearance in that one talent show. After that, Cheerily encouraged Sweetie Belle to take on one of the acting parts, a part with singing. Oh, that's good. Sweetie Belle has such an amazing voice. It will be nice to hear her sing. Yes, it will. Personally, I'd bet that singing is her special talent, but we can't be sure until that little cutie mark of hers appears, can we? Twilight shook her head as the pair began to get close to the schoolhouse. While the school and its playground were set up on one side of the path, the school's outdoor stage, the one and only permanent stage in Ponyville, was set up on the opposite side of the road. Cheerily stood in the center of the many colts and fillies, giving directions to the eagerly listening young ponies. Yet, when Cheerily saw Twilight and Rarity approaching, she let the students slip off to recess a little earlier than scheduled, so she could talk with the two unicorns. You two have excellent timing, Cheerily said while greeting Rarity and Twilight with a smile. I was just telling the class how you were kind enough to volunteer your time to help us make this play. Twilight took a moment to wave to Nyx, who smiled and waved back before running off to recess with her classmates. Twilight then turned her attention back to Cheerily and said, always glad to help, Cheerily. Though, we still haven't been told just what the play is supposed to be about. Oh, of course. Here, take a copy of this. Cheerily moved over to a nearby stool and quickly picked up a copy of the play's script. She held it out to Twilight, who gingerly took it in her magic. She opened it to the first page as Rarity looked over her shoulder. Reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters, Twilight read aloud. Cheerily smiled. Yes, it was Nyx's idea. She found an old fairy tale about how princesses Celestia and Luna kept the world in balance, and then how Luna became the frightful Nightmare Moon. Apple Bloom then had the idea to incorporate the adventure you and your friends had where you defeated Nightmare Moon and restored Princess Luna back to normal. Wow, that's actually not a bad story. A wonderful little tale for a little school play. Much better than the usual fare, Rarity mused. What are the plays usually about? Twilight asked. Well, when Cheerily and I were in class together, our spring festival play was about a pony picnic that got stolen by ants. It was cute, but not exactly what you would call great theater, though it was because of that particular play that I got my cutie mark. Rarity's horn lit with magic, and she took another copy of the script off of a short stool and began to flip through the pages. This, however, sounds far more interesting. It's so exciting. Usually, the school play is held the day before the spring festival and we just have it on our little stage here, but I told the mayor what we were planning, and she said if the students can do a good enough job, we might get our own slot in the festival. It would be a wonderful opportunity for the kids. They would get to perform in front of every pony on that big stage they set up in the town square, Cheerily explained. Rarity perked up, nudging Twilight as she pointed to a spot in the script. Oh, look here, they have Pinkie Pie's song. You mean the song she sang in the Everfree Forest when she was telling us to giggle at the ghostly and crack up at the creepy? Twilight asked, flipping to the same page in the script. The very one. Oh, I can only imagine how Pinkie Pie will react when she hears about this. We won't be able to stop her from bouncing for days. Twilight giggled, picturing Pinkie Pie's reaction. Yeah, she'll probably start singing along right there in the audience. Still, this looks fun. Oh yes, it's going to be one of the best plays the school has ever put on. Cheerily energetically agreed. I've actually pulled together both classes because there are just so many parts to play and things to be done. And we've already got all the characters cast. You can see who is who on the second page. Twilight and Rarity nodded and flipped to second page of the script. Reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters. A Ponyville Elementary School production. Written by Cheerily. Music composed by Lyra Heartstrings. Narrator, Zecora. Twilight Sparkle, Dinky Doo. Applejack, Apple Bloom. Rarity, Sweetie Belle. Rainbow Dash, Scootaloo. Fluttershy, Cotton Cloudy. Pinkie Pie, Sunny Days. The Mayor, Little Hoof. Sea Serpent, Tornado Bolt. Manticore, Archer. Princess Celestia, Diamond Tiara. Princess Luna, Silver Spoon. Nightmare Moon, Nyx. Ponyville residents in Everfree Forest Trees. Hot Rod, Ruby Pinch, Paradise, Tootsie Flute. Flash, Peachy Pie, Lily Dache. Set design. Ruby Pinch, Paradise, Peachy Pie. Costumes. Sunny Days, Tootsie Flute, Lily Dache. Stage hooves. Hot Rod and Flash. You have Zecora as the narrator, Rarity noted before she glanced up from the page. It was Apple Bloom that not only suggested it but also got Zecora to agree. From what the fillies and colts say, she did an excellent job telling stories on Nightmare Night. Too good even, Twilight mentioned as she recalled the events of the Nightmare Night when Princess Luna had come to Ponyville. I think she's half the reason Pinkie Pie and all those fillies and colts got as worked up as they did. Nightmare Night aside, Zecora does have the perfect voice to narrate a story of this genre, Rarity mused before looking thoughtfully at Cheerily. Though, I would suggest you let her come up with her own lines. Cheerily arched an eyebrow. Why is that? Zecora speaks in rhymes very naturally, and having a rhyming narrator would just give the whole play a very old world, fairy tale appeal. That, and I can't imagine what her voice would sound like if she didn't rhyme like she does. I'll be sure to sit down with her and work on the script then. Rarity nodded and read further down the page. Well, would you look at that? Sweetie Belle is going to be playing me. Though, I suppose that does make sense. She does have my wonderful white coat. Oh, and Scootaloo gets to be Rainbow Dash. She must be positively ecstatic. Oh yes, Cheerily said with a small laugh. Scootaloo was practically begging for the chance to play Rainbow Dash the moment she realized she'd be a character. One could argue it's a role she was born to play. Yes, Scootaloo is definitely the filly you hear saying, awesome, just about as much as Rainbow, Rarity agreed before looking back at the page. Let's see, don't know her, wait, Sea Serpent. Do you mean Stephen Magnet? Who? Stephen Magnet, that's the name of the sea serpent we met on our way to find the elements of harmony. Oh, I do hope you are portraying him well. Such a well-groomed and polite sea serpent shouldn't be relegated to a role of a simple monster. Wouldn't you agree, Twilight? Twilight. Rarity and Cheerily turned to look at Twilight, who was stiff as a statue and a few shades paler than normal. Twilight dear, what's wrong? Rarity asked before taking notice of where Twilight's eyes were focused. Returning to her own copy of the script, Rarity read down a few more lines and then froze up as well. Is something wrong? Cheerily asked, concerned as to why the two unicorns were acting so strangely. Oh, of course not, Rarity replied, regaining her composure. I was just curious about some of your casting. For example, what makes you feel Nyx will play a good Nightmare Moon? She's a sweetheart, and, well, she's also very timid and sensitive. Nightmare Moon, on the other hoof, was, well. Cheerily raised a hoof to her mouth and suppressed a chuckle. Yes, but isn't that the point of acting, Rarity, to be characters we usually aren't? Besides, it was Scootaloo that suggested it, and every pony in class agreed that Nyx would be the best Nightmare Moon, if only because she has a black coat. I asked Nyx if she was okay with that, and she didn't seem to mind at all. Quote. Oh, well, I suppose that if Nyx agreed to the role. I think she'll be just fine, Cheerily assured them. I'll admit, I think it will be a little challenging for her. Nightmare Moon's character has a lot of lines. Not as much as, say, your character, Twilight, but still a significant amount. Nyx, however, is a smart filly, and I think she should be able to memorize everything she'll need to say. Of course, I'm sure she'll be a perfect Nightmare Moon. Don't you agree, Twilight? Rarity said before she elbowed Twilight in the side, snapping her dazed friend back to reality. Oh, yes, of course. Perfect, Twilight said with a forced grin. Tilda tilda tilda. It's going to be so much fun. Nyx chirped as she bounced out of the kitchen with Twilight following a few steps behind. Over the course of dinner, Nyx had chattered almost constantly about the upcoming play. She had just come back from the dress rehearsal in her full Nightmare Moon regalia. Are you sure? Twilight asked. You're going to be up on stage in front of a lot of ponies. It is kind of scary, Nyx admitted, her enthusiasm diminishing as she turned to face Twilight, but every pony else is really excited about it and are having a lot of fun. But what if you forget a line? Cheerily promised she's going to be just off stage, so she can whisper our lines to us if we forget, Nyx answered. But I've been studying my lines really hard. Nyx frowned a little, glancing off to the side. That and Diamond Tiara's been saying I'm not good enough to play Nightmare Moon. She's been saying that Cheerily should get a rock since it would do a better job, but I'm going to show her, Nyx snapped with determination. I'm going to do my best and I'm not going to forget a single line. I'm going to be the best Nightmare Moon I can be. Twilight winced, cursing to herself quietly before sighing. I'm sorry Nyx, but you can't be in the play. Nyx stood stunned for a moment, her brain having trouble processing what she had just heard. What? I said you can't be in the play, Twilight repeated with more authority in her voice. But Nyx stammered in confusion, why can't I be in the play? Did I do something bad? No, I'm sorry, Nyx, but you just can't be in the play. But the play is tomorrow and they won't be able to perform without me. Twilight frowned, feeling her heart clench in her chest. It had been a few weeks since she had found out Nyx was going to be Nightmare Moon in the play, and, over those 2 weeks, Twilight had agonized over what to do. Did she let Nyx participate in the play or make up an excuse to keep her at the library? Twilight had actually started leaning towards letting Nyx be in the play, considering how much fun she seemed to be having. 2 things, however, quickly changed Twilight's mind. The first was the announcement that Princess Celestia and Princess Luna were going to be attending the Spring Festival. Princess Celestia had attended the festival in the past, but the sisters were especially eager this year. They seemed particularly interested in seeing the school's play, which would be the first stage performance of the story of Princess Luna's return. Twilight knew Nyx's disguise could fool common ponies, but she couldn't expect it to fool the princesses. Princess Luna had been Nightmare Moon, and Princess Celestia was arguably just as familiar with her. They would surely notice Nyx's resemblance, and Twilight feared Nyx would be banished on the spot. The other thing that had swayed Twilight was Nyx's costume. The armor was made of stiff fabric and wire, the wings were fake, and the sparkling mane was obviously just indigo fabric with glitter, but it was enough. The costume made Nyx look too much like Nightmare Moon, especially with the crescent moon cutie mark painted on her flank. Sure, some ponies in Ponyville might just think the costume was wonderful, but Twilight feared others would draw unwanted connections. I'm so sorry, Nyx, but they'll just have to make do without you. But Nyx pleaded, only for Twilight to shake her head firmly. I said no, Nyx. Nyx tensed up, sniffling a little. She didn't break down and cry, though. Instead, Nyx glared up at Twilight and stamped her hooves against the floor. But it's not fair. If I haven't done anything wrong, then I should be able to go to the play. Nyx. No, Nyx snapped, cutting Twilight off as she threw her first temper tantrum. It's not fair. I've worked really hard, and I learned all my lines, and... Nyx. It's not fair. Nyx. Twilight barked, forcing the filly to fall silent, though she continued to glare coldly at Twilight. I'm sorry, I really am, but this is just how it has to be. Now, I want you to go upstairs and take that costume off. But... Upstairs. Twilight said, stamping her hoof. Nyx met Twilight's hard gaze and attempted to glare her into submission. When that failed, Nyx broke down. She bolted upstairs, wailing the whole way and slamming the bedroom door shut behind her. Twilight, don't you think you could just let her be in the play? Spike asked, having watched the confrontation from the sidelines. I mean, she was really looking forward to it. Twilight's face fell as she looked over at Spike. I know she was, Spike, and I want to let her, but it's just too risky. If Princesses Celestia and Luna were to figure out the truth that she was made by the spell those cultists were casting, they'd banish her to the moon. They'd take her away, and I can't let that happen. Spike crossed his arms and looked at Twilight with a very skeptical expression. Do you really think Princess Celestia would just do that? I mean, she trusts you completely. I'm sure you could convince her that Nyx isn't Nightmare Moon. I'm glad you think so, Spike, Twilight said before heaving a heavy sigh, but I just can't risk it. Tilda tilda tilda. Now, Spike and I have to meet with the princesses this evening. Princess Celestia expects the both of us to be there to watch the evening performances with her and Princess Luna, Twilight said. She was talking to Nix, who was sitting on the floor nearby in her normal, everyday clothes instead of the costume she'd rather have been wearing. Aloysius will be keeping an eye on you, and I expect you to behave for him. Yes, ma'am, Nix said, the tone of disappointment thick in her voice. It was the first time Nix had ever been angry like this, but Twilight knew it was for the best. I'm sorry, Nix, and I'll make this up to you, Twilight promised as she turned to leave. Try not to think about it. Spike and I will be back soon. With that, Twilight stepped out the door and closed it tightly behind her. Aloysius then flew across the room, took the key from the door lock in his talons, and flew back to Twilight's writing desk where he landed with a flutter of his feathers. Nix scampered to the window and peered outside. She watched Twilight leave, holding on to some small flicker of hope that Twilight would change her mind, come back, and say she could be in the play. However, when Twilight disappeared around the corner of a distant building, Nix scrunched up her nose, jumped down from the window, and began to stomp across the floor. It isn't fair, it isn't fair. Cheerilee is expecting me to be there. They're all counting on me. I practiced so hard. It isn't fair. Who? Nix looked over at Aloysius, who was watching her with his head cocked to one side. Nix stared back at him for a few moments before going wide-eyed and scampering over. Please, Aloysius, let me go. They won't be able to do the play without me. I'm supposed to be Nightmare Moon, and you can't tell the story without Nightmare Moon. Who? Nightmare Moon, the bad mare. Please, Aloysius. Please, 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 pleassee, Nix begged. She looked up at Aloysius with the biggest, most pleading eyes she could muster. She even pushed out her bottom lip, pouting just as Sweetie Belle had taught her. Despite Nix's pleas, Aloysius continued to stare blankly at her while his clawed grip on the door key tightened. His beady eyes and non-expressive beak were a perfect poker face crafted by nature itself, and thus Nix had no clue if her tactics were having any effect on him. Nix, however, had one more trick. While the school had been rehearsing, Silver Spoon and Diamond Tiara were asked to try and learn to cry on command. This was because the royal sisters were supposed to cry when they were reunited at the end of the play. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had whined it was impossible. Nix, out of curiosity and a small, spiteful desire to prove them wrong, wanted to see if she could learn to do it. It had taken practice, but, if she thought about the right things, she could get her eyes to water. It was a trick she had yet to put to use, but, with the royal sisters as her witness, she was going to get to the play. So she began to add her own touch to her carefully crafted display of begging. She let her eyes water, and, soon, a few pitiful tears streaked down her cheeks. Please, Aloysius. Aloysius stared at Nix as coldly as he had before but, within a few moments, was forced to look away. He hooted in defeat before taking off from the desk. Nix watched him circle the room a few times and then smiled as Aloysius expertly placed the key back into the door's lock. He made another pass, turned the key, and unlocked the door with a resounding click. Oh, thank you, Aloysius. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Nix said with several bounces before running upstairs. In a flash, she got out of her vest, tossed off her glasses, and pulled out her costume. With a single leap, Nix landed in all four of the costume's shoes. She then began putting on her fake armor. Cheerilee would paint on the fake cutie mark once Nix got to the performance, but she would have to get the rest of the costume on herself. The fake armor was easy enough, but then came the challenging part, the costume's wings. They were comprised of feathers glued on a wooden skeleton that was then attached to an all-black vest similar in design to the purple one she wore on a daily basis. Personally, Nix didn't see the point of wearing fake wings when she had real ones, but Twilight had insisted that, if she was going to be in the play, she had to wear the whole costume. Nix, however, struggled and fumbled with the fake wings. They were the one part of the costume that was poorly designed, and they usually needed to be put on before the helmet. Unfortunately, Nix had already put on the helmet, and she was in such a rush that she didn't want to waste time taking it off. As Nix was working on getting the last part of the wings secured, she tripped on her own hooves. She stumbled and let out a panicked eep as she fell to one side. The wings hit the floor first, Nix landed on top of them, and the end of the fall was punctuated by the sound of splintering wood. No, Nix cried, now starting to shed genuine tears while looking at the horribly bent wings. She nudged at them with her hoof, which caused one of the fake wings to snap in half and flop to the floor. Nix might have started to wail if she hadn't glanced back at where the fake wings would have been and noticed the real wings that were already there. Well, if I keep them straight all night, that might work, Nix mumbled to herself as she extended her wings vertically. She knew she was going to be in so much trouble with Twilight once she got home for sneaking out to the play and for going out with her real wings visible. Still, at the moment, she was less afraid of being punished by Twilight than she was of disappointing the rest of her class. She did not want to let down her few friends, and she was already unpopular enough with the rest of the class. Every pony in class, except her friends, thought of her as a crybaby, a teacher's pet, or both. Ruining the play would only make things worse. Her decision made, Nix broke the fake wings off the costume vest and used a pair of scissors to cut some crude holes in the fabric. She then slipped it on and did everything she could to make her wings look like the costume's fake ones. With vest on, Nix double-checked her costume in a mirror. She went down a mental checklist, and, when she was sure she had everything, she galloped downstairs and out the front door. She doubled back only once, to poke her head in the library door and offer a final, "Thank you" to Aloysius. Then, Nix ran as fast as her little hooves could carry her towards the center of Ponyville. Questions, comments, concerns. pen.stroke.pony@gmail.com. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Copyright Hasbro. I do not own the intellectual properties this fan fiction is based on. Click here for the Past Sins version archive. Six Reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters. Past Sins. By Pen Stroke. Assisted by Batty Gloom. Chapter 6. Reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters. Twilight, along with the rest of the audience, applauded as the actors on the stage bowed and the curtain fell, marking the end of another performance. All of Ponyville, as well as a number of ponies from other towns, was sitting in the town's central square, which had been transformed into an outdoor theater for the spring festival. A large, temporary stage with a professional setup of lights and similar great equipment had been constructed on one side of the plaza that surrounded the town hall. The rest of the area was packed with ponies and lit by long strings of paper lanterns that arched from building to building. The members of the audience were packed tight and were all eagerly waiting to see the next scheduled performance. Yet Twilight, Spike, and their friends were not amongst the crowd on the ground. Instead, they had been invited to sit with Princesses Celestia and Luna in what was being called the VIP section, for very important ponies, which had been established on the second-floor balcony of the town hall. Oh, that was a funny one. I loved that one part where they threw a pie. Pinkie Pie cheered as she bounced on her seat cushion. Yeah, Rainbow Dash agreed as she tried to stifle her giggles. That one pony just reared back and pow. Face full of banana cream. Spike, who had rolled onto his back and was holding his stomach, managed to quell his laughter just long enough to say, "Total laugh riot." Yes, I do suppose it was enjoyable, if a little lowbrow, Rarity remarked. Though I particularly liked the joke about blues music. Really? 'Cause that one was kind of stupid if you ask me, Applejack argued. It must have simply gone over your head. Really? Then wouldn't it have hit her hat? Pinkie Pie asked, making Rainbow Dash snort. Oh geez, Rainbow Dash laughed, some pony should tell those stallions that one. It should be in that play. The others were giggling right along with Dash, including Princesses Celestia and Luna. While the group of ponies had been a little tense around the royal sisters at first, a few good performances, along with Celestia's casual, friendly personality, helped to lighten the mood. Princess Luna had joined in the conversation from time to time as well. While not as vocal as Celestia, Luna had, at the very least, practiced speaking with a more modern dialect since her public appearance at Nightmare Night. She had even cracked a particularly witty joke about the first performance, further helping Twilight and company feel more at ease around the royal sisters. And what is next on the festival program, sister? Princess Luna asked, eager to see the next performance but keeping her enthusiasm in check. Celestia casually cracked open her copy of the festival program and glanced across the page. Let's see, the reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters by the Ponyville Elementary School. Oh yeah, this is the one I've been waiting for, Dash said eagerly, sitting up on her cushion. This is the one about us. Quote. Personally, I ain't as excited, Applejack admitted. I know Apple Bloom wouldn't mean ta, but she could right easily make me look like a fool, and I don't need no ponies snickerin' behind my back because of this. I'm sure Apple Bloom will do fine, Fluttershy reassured. After all, she actually knows you. I don't even know the pony who's going to be playing me. Yeah, I guess you're right, Applejack agreed as she flipped open the program sitting at her hooves. Hey, says here they got Nyx to play Nightmare Moon. Really? Huh, I guess that's kind of cool. I mean, sure, she's got the right coat color, but I don't know if she's Nightmare Moon material. Rainbow Dash, that's mean. Fluttershy scolded. Dash shrugged. Hey, I just call it as I see it. Well, I wouldn't get your hopes up, girls. Nyx wasn't feeling well earlier, Twilight lied. Oh, the poor thing, did she have a stomachache? Fluttershy asked. Oh yes, really nasty tummy ache, Twilight said, more than willing to latch onto Fluttershy's provided excuse. I actually left her back at the library with Aloysius. I doubt she'll be able to make it. Twilight, do correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like this little filly is living with you, Celestia said casually. I'm surprised you haven't told me. Oh, really? Haha, I thought I'd told you. She's my cousin, half cousin, really, but yeah, she's been staying with me for a while now. Twilight was trying to speak as casually as possible but was unable to stop herself from putting on a stupid, forced smile before quickly changing the subject. So, Princess Luna, are you going to be okay? I mean, this play is kind of about. Do not worry about me, Twilight Sparkle, Luna said flatly. I will be quite alright. The story of my return cannot be told without telling the rise and fall of Nightmare Moon. If I didn't want ponies to know about that part of my past, then I never should have let my jealousy get the better of me. Luna turned to face Twilight and put on a reassuring smile. Furthermore, I've been informed that this play is not meant to dwell on my sins but to celebrate my return to my true self. It is also performed by elementary school children. If anything, it will make ponies laugh at Nightmare Moon, and I think it would be nice to see that particular part of my past portrayed comically. You do not need to worry about my welfare, though I thank you for asking. Oh, you're welcome, Princess, Twilight said, smiling both because Luna was doing well and because she had successfully redirected the conversation. It was then the Mayor of Ponyville, Ivory Scroll, walked out to the center of the stage, once more playing her part as the Spring Festival's master of ceremonies. Fillies and gentlecolts, Ivory began with her usual flair. I am now proud to present the Ponyville Elementary School's original play, The Reunion of the Royal Pony Sisters. The crowd applauded, the parents in the crowd with noticeable vigor, as the mayor stepped off the stage and the curtains opened. Smoke began to curl out from the stage, and a few dark set pieces loomed in the sea of mist. The only light came from the stars and moon in the sky above, and, for a moment, all things were quiet. Beware, beware you pony folk, for the tale I am about to tell is no joke. It is a story, begun in days, months, and years gone by, about the pony sisters who, in harmony, ruled the sky. At this, one of the set pieces on the stage moved, causing some ponies in the audience to jump and others to gasp. What had appeared at first to be a set piece was, in fact, a cloaked equine figure, who moved to the center of the stage as a light clicked on. The single light cast heavy shadows across the figure, whose body was hidden in the darkness of the cloak until she lifted a white and black striped hoof. Zecora couldn't help but smile as she removed the hood of her cloak. She looked out across the audience, who stared back at her with varying levels of shock. The eldest did raise the sun, bringing forth the dawn, Zecora narrated, continuing the performance's introduction. The other brought the moon when the sun to bed had gone. Two more lights clicked on, revealing two small figures. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon were standing on the opposite sides of the stage, dressed in costumes that made it easy to identify them as Princesses Celestia and Luna. The two fillies climbed up steps hidden behind the painted backdrop of rolling hills and came to a stop when they each stood on the peak of a painted mountain. At the same time, Zecora retreated from center stage to continue her narration while a number of other students came out and began to dance and play. The two sisters brought harmony and balance to the moon and sun, Zecora continued, her voice carrying out over the crowd though she was currently hidden from view. Beneath their guidance all different ponies lived, laughed, and had fun. Wow, Zecora is doing a really good job with the whole narrator thing, Dash whispered to Applejack. You got that right, Sugarcube. Quote. But not all was well, the younger grew envious. To her, the ponies were ignorant and oblivious. They frolicked, laughed, and played through bright days. They lived their lives under the sun's golden rays. Yet they ignored her stars and slept through her night. To her, it just wasn't fair, it just wasn't right. While Zecora spoke, the fillies and colts on stage performed the scene. Diamond Tiara, dressed as Princess Celestia, stood proud as the ponies on stage played and laughed, but when she hid and Silver Spoon came out as Princess Luna, the other ponies on stage all quickly pretended to fall asleep, some playfully snoring. In time, it all became too much for the younger to bear, to have her night ignored, to feel as if no pony cared. One fateful night she did protest. She refused to lower the moon in the west. Luna, why won't you lower the moon? It's time for the sun to come up, Diamond Tiara said, overextending the words as she gave a very forced regal tone to her voice. She and Silver Spoon were facing one another from opposite sides of the stage, standing on wooden steps hidden behind the plywood mountains. Below them, their classmates continued pretending to sleep, as if ignorant to what was going on. I am tired of no pony seeing my night, Silver Spoon shouted back while she faked a regal tone. I work so hard on it, and all they do is sleep through it. It's beautiful, but no pony ever sees it but me. Well, Diamond Tiara stammered. Looks like some pony has forgotten her lines, Rarity whispered. Personally, I don't think it could have happened to a nastier filly. Quote. Well, what else are ponies supposed to do? It's too dark to work at night and, it's too bright to sleep during the day, Diamond Tiara finally answered. This caused some chuckles to go through the audience, Luna herself snorting. Diamond Tiara, in her moment of panic, had reverted to her normal, snooty way of speaking, and her voice was a comically inappropriate match for any princess. Celestia just smiled and took it in good humor. She even chuckled under her breath. I don't care, Silver Spoon yelled, able to remember her lines better than Diamond Tiara. I won't have my work be ignored anymore. They are going to see the majesty of my night, whether they want to or not. But sister, Diamond Tiara called out, only for her voice to fall silent as the light on Silver Spoon grew dark and Zecora began narrating again. But it was too late for kind words to soothe the younger's heart, too deeply had she been hurt by the ponies who ignored her skybound art. The bitterness inside her twisted, writhed, and contorted, to the point that even the princess's exterior became distorted. Gone was her gentle visage in the emotional monsoon, leaving behind only the dreadful nightmare moon. The light on the right side of the stage clicked on again, and gasps cut through the audience. Silver Spoon had been replaced by another little filly, one with an all-black coat and supposedly fake wings that were stretched high and held perfectly still. On her flank was a fairly well-painted crescent moon cutie mark, and the fake armor she wore looked genuine from a distance. The most convincing part of her costume, however, were her eyes. They were shaped like a dragon's, with brilliant turquoise irises and whites that were a lighter teal. Hey, look. Nix made it. Applejack whispered energetically. Sweet apples, that little filly does pull off a convincing nightmare moon. Oh yes, of course, Rarity agreed, glancing nervously at Twilight. She's positively a doppelganger. Quote. Celestia leaned over to whisper to Twilight. And it's good to see she's over her tummy ache. Must have just been pre-show butterflies. Quote. Yeah, butterflies, Twilight answered weakly, suddenly feeling as if she were about to lose her lunch. Nix looked at the audience and realized just how many ponies she was standing in front of. She instinctively closed her eyes and struggled against a growing temptation to hide. She had been so excited about the play, so excited to do the story, and so excited to make some new friends that she hadn't realized that there were going to be this many ponies watching her. Nix licked her lips and swallowed, thinking about her friends. She had just gotten herself in deep trouble with Twilight for them, and she wasn't going to let them down now. She just had to get through her lines, and she had practiced those lines so many times she could recite them in her sleep. She just needed to take a breath and say them. And never again will the ponies of Equestria see the sun. I hereby decree that this night shall last forever. Muwahahah. Nix boasted, though her fake evil laugh at the end did nothing but draw a small round of laughter from the crowd. It, however, wasn't the mean, mocking laughter of bullies, but the kind, supportive laughter of ponies enjoying her performance. It was laughter that gave Nix more courage. She could do this, and she would do this, because she was already in trouble for it anyway. Yet, while the laughter gave Nix courage, the reaction of the crowd baffled Twilight. Why hadn't an angry mob formed? Nix looked too much like Nightmare Moon, but no pony seemed to take the resemblance seriously. Were they all convinced that Nix's costume was just that good? She couldn't contemplate it for long as Zecora's voice drew her attention back to the stage. And night did last across the pony lands, despite the elders' pleas and demands. In the end, with no other choice to be made, the sister had to take up the crusade. With the elements of harmony, a power beyond all measure, the elder banished her sister, an act in which she took no pleasure. The lights on the stage began to flicker on and off in a rainbow of colors as Nix faked cries of anger and pain. When the lights returned to normal, Nyx had disappeared from view, and, in her place, a plywood moon painted with the visage of the mare in the moon had been lowered. To the moon was the younger one then sent, so that the ponies of Equestria she would never again torment. The elder then took on duties twofold. She tended both the moon silver and the sun gold. Harmony was returned, the elder's actions many did commend. And for 1,000 years all was good, but this story is not at its end. With that, the curtains quickly shut, the first act of the play ending to an appropriate round of applause. There was only one pony who didn't applaud, Luna. While she had enjoyed the children's performance, she had sunk down into her seat when the filly playing Nightmare Moon had appeared on stage. Luna hung her head and stared at her hooves as memories of that particular moment in her life came rushing back like angry spirits. Before Luna could get too lost in her own thoughts, she felt a very gentle touch. Looking up, she saw a large white wing gently draped over her shoulder. Are you going to be okay? Celestia asked very quietly, using her wing to gently hug her younger sister to her side. Yes, I'll be all right, Luna replied, resting her head on Celestia's shoulder. Thank you, sister. Tilda. While the play had the level of professionalism that one would expect from something put on by colts and fillies, the crowd as a whole was enjoying it, even those who weren't parents. The first scene of the second act involved Twilight meeting up with her friends and Nightmare Moon's return. That led into the second scene, where Twilight and her friends faced the trials within the Everfree Forest. Of the crowd, Twilight's friends seemed to be enjoying it the most. Dash was thrilled to see how awesomely she was being portrayed by Scootaloo, while Applejack and Rarity were satisfied by how well their little sisters were acting. Dinky Doo put on a fairly good impression of Twilight, though she tripped on her lines occasionally. Pinkie Pie, however, seemed to have the widest grin of all just from hearing her song about giggling at the ghostly being sung on stage. Twilight even found herself able to enjoy the play, though not until her concerns had calmed from a boil to a simmer. She was still going to scold Nyx at the first opportunity for not only disobeying her, but also for forgetting her glasses. Still, so far, nothing bad had happened. Princesses Celestia and Luna hadn't winged down to the stage to capture Nyx, and no angry mob had formed out of the audience. They all just thought Nyx had a great costume, and Twilight wasn't about to give them a reason to think otherwise. So, for the moment, Twilight could only sit and watch. The performance was now entering the third scene of the second act, and the climax was about to begin. The backdrop had changed to resemble the interior of the old castle, and Zecora began her narration once more. And with the final trial past, they did arrive. They could plainly see the elements they hoped to revive, Zecora said as the 6 ponies playing Twilight and her friends stepped into view and drew close to the wooden pedestals that held the fake elements of harmony. The elements of harmony. We've found them. Dinky Doo cheered as the group of young actresses moved forward. Unlike the real elements, the fake ones were set on pedestals low enough to the ground that the little fillies were able to reach them without being able to fly. As the other fillies worked to take the stones down, the one playing Pinkie Pie began to point and count the stones. 1, 2, 3, 4, there's only 5. Squee. Pinkie Pie whispered, trying to keep her voice down but finding it difficult. I said that. This is so cool. They got everything just right. Quote. That's mostly because of you, Sugar Cube, since you somehow remembered everything we said. Quote. Oh, that was easy. I just read the transcript. Quote. You read the what now? Quote. Shish. I'm trying to watch. Dash grumbled as she continued to watch the stage intently. Where's the 6th? Scootaloo asked as she and the other fillies looked around. Dinky Doo moved closer to the 5 fake elements. The book said when the 5 are present, a spark will cause the 6th element to be revealed. What in the hay is that supposed to mean? Apple Bloom asked, pulling off her sister's thicker accent fairly well. I'm not sure, but I have an idea. Stand back, I don't know what will happen. Come on now, y'all. She needs to concentrate, Apple Bloom ordered, ushering the other fillies off the stage and leaving Dinky Doo alone with the fake elements. Dinky knelt down beside the painted, round props and made her horn glow, making it look like she was attempting a spell. As Dinky Doo concentrated, a fog, borrowed from the Cloudsdale Weather Factory and tinted indigo by special lanterns, began to envelop the stage. The pedestals that had held the prop elements of harmony were pulled out of view by ropes. At the same time, students backstage tugged on fishing line connected to the elements, making them slide across the stage. When Dinky noticed them being dragged away from her, she reached out a hoof. The elements. Her shout, however, did nothing but draw evil laughter from off stage. The laughter had come from Nyx. She stepped onto the right side of the stage while the lights flickered and students behind the scenes smashed pots and pans together, simulating thunder and lightning. Yet, despite Nyx's ominous entrance, Dinky did as the real Twilight Sparkle had done. She lowered her head and beat her hoof at the ground aggressively. Nyx lifted a hoof in disbelief and arched an eyebrow. You're kidding. You're kidding, right? Dinky, however, was not kidding. She charged at Nyx, and Nyx did the same. They raced towards one another, and, just as the two were about to cross paths, the stage lights went dark, causing a small gasp of confusion to cascade across the audience. When the lights came back on, Nyx was standing alone in the center of the stage, and Dinky Doo was over by the elements. Her horn was glowing while some of the backstage students covered and uncovered theater lanterns in an attempt to make it look like the elements were beginning to activate. Nyx raced across the stage, but before she could reach Dinky Doo, a number of lights, which were aimed out at the audience, flashed. The bright light blinded most of the crowd and obscured the stage for a few key moments. The lights were then dimmed, and, with the blinding effect gone, the audience was able to see Dinky Doo on the far side of the stage. She was pulling herself off the ground, as if she had been thrown back, while Nyx stood in the center of the fake elements of harmony. No, no, Nyx snapped, shrinking back in fear of the fake elements, but, as in reality, the elements did not activate. The students playing with the theater lanterns stopped while Dinky Doo put on an overly large expression of shock. But, where's the sixth element? Nyx broke out her playful, evil laughter before she stomped on the fake elements. They crumbled under her hooves, and, when they were nothing but shattered pieces, Nyx turned to face Dinky Doo. She put on the wickedest smile she could manage and lifted a hoof to point at Dinky. You little fool, thinking you could defeat me? Nyx called out, her voice turning very dark, very serious, and very convincing. Now you will never see your princess or your son. The night will last forever. Nyx finished before letting out an evil laugh, the most convincing evil laugh the audience had heard from her all evening. It sent a shiver down Twilight's spine. She had heard Nightmare Moon say those very same words and in a very similar way. She swallowed nervously and risked a glance at Celestia and Luna. The princesses still seemed to be just enjoying the play, but Twilight still couldn't shake the worrisome thought from her mind. Nyx had said those last lines too well. Tilde tilde tilde. And thus the night again became ruled over by the younger, and banished from her body was the vengeful hunger. And from this story may a lesson you firmly grip, there is nothing stronger than the power of friendship. With those last lines from Zecora, the curtains fell and the audience broke into a roaring round of applause. A few moments later, the curtains reopened as Cheerilee stepped onto the stage and gave a few quick bows and waves. Thank you all, Cheerilee said to the crowd. I'm happy to see that you all enjoyed the play. The students worked really hard, and, because of their efforts, this became one of the best plays ever put on by Ponyville Elementary School. Now, let's welcome the students back to the stage. First, a round of applause for those who played our story's heroes. Dinky Doo, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, Cotton Cloudy, and Sunny Days. The crowd eagerly complied, stomping their hooves as the students began to stream onto the stage. Applejack gave out an extra loud holler for Apple Bloom, and Rarity put her hooves together and whistled when it was Sweetie Belle's turn to take a bow. Next, Cheerilee continued, doing her best to shout above the applause of her crowd, we have the fillies who portrayed our dearest Princess Celestia and Princess Luna, who have graced us with their presence this evening, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon came out, acting like proper divas as they smirked and bowed in their Princess Celestia and Princess Luna costumes. They lingered on the stage a little longer than they should have, soaking in the applause. It took Cheerilee motioning towards them to get the two fillies to back up and stand in line with the others. And now, playing the wicked and dastardly Nightmare Moon, give a big round of applause for Nyx. Twilight was shocked when the crowd cheered loudly as Nyx nervously walked onto stage, the cheering only slightly quieter than the applause had been for Dinky Doo and the other fillies who played the main characters in the play. Still, the applause Nyx was receiving was louder than what Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had received, and, by the looks on their faces, the two snooty fillies knew it. Twilight couldn't keep herself from applauding either, even though Nyx was still in so much trouble. Twilight even heard a whistle come from her side, and, when she turned to look, she saw it had come from Celestia. Even Luna was applauding, despite the fact Nyx had been portraying something that she probably wished to forget. Did the two princesses really just believe Nyx was in costume? It was a miracle Twilight would never have believed possible. Nyx shakily bowed before stepping back to stand with the rest of her class. Cheerilee proceeded to introduce the rest of the class. She then called the names of some students a second time, letting them step forward and take credit for the work they had done making costumes, constructing set pieces, or working behind the scenes. The final two ponies invited up were Lyra and Zecora. Lyra was thanked for her work composing the play's music, and Zecora, of course, deserved a round of applause for her expert narration. The final mare to be credited was Cheerilee herself. Zecora introduced her to the crowd as the playwright and director, and, with a small blush, she bowed to the many applauding ponies. After that the whole cast bowed a final time, the stage's curtains closed, and the Spring Festival entered an hour-long intermission. Tilda tilda tilda. Mommy. Dinky Doo chirped as she ran up to a gray-coated, blonde-maned Pegasus. Did I do good? You were wonderful, Muffin, Ditsy Doo replied, giving her little filly a nuzzle and a hug. Twilight passed by the warm scene with Rarity, Applejack, and Rainbow Dash as they moved backstage to where the students were getting out of their costumes. It didn't take long for the quartet to find the fillies they were looking for. Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, Sweetie Belle, and Nix were drinking water from paper cups. 3 of the fillies had already gotten out of their costumes while Nix was still completely in hers. Darlings, that was positively fabulous. Rarity chimed, alerting the 4 fillies to the group's approach. Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle all quickly turned and ran over, grinning ear to ear. Nix, however, hung back and tried not to meet Twilight's gaze. Really, was it good? Sweetie Belle asked. Positively pitch perfect, Rarity assured. Yay, big props, Scootaloo, you got me down pat. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, Scootaloo rattled off, overwhelmed by the fact that she was getting such a compliment from her personal hero, Rainbow Dash. How about me, big sis? It was like looking in a mirror, Sugar Cube, Applejack praised, giving Apple Bloom a little noogie. Y'all did a great job, didn't they, Twilight? Yes, they all did amazingly well, Twilight agreed. Nix chanced to look up. Her currently undisguised dragon eyes met Twilight's, and she was able to smile. She smiled because Twilight wasn't glaring at her with disappointment or anger. By the way, Twee, nice work on Nix's eyes, Dash said before fluttering over to inspect Nix more closely. I didn't know you knew a spell for this. Twilight nervously smiled, thankful that Rainbow Dash had assumed it was a spell. Oh, just something I found in one of my books. That is so awesome. I've got to try it. Say what now? Twilight asked as her smile weakened. Come on, Twilight, Dash said. She landed and used a hoof to motion towards her face. Lay that spell on me. I want to see what I look like with dragon eyes. Twilight swallowed nervously, only now realizing that she might actually be asked to perform the spell. There was no going back. She'd have to try at least once, and, if she failed, then she could tell Dash she'd do it tomorrow, buying herself enough time to actually figure out the spell. Maybe she could pull it off. It would just be an illusion spell like the one she put on Nix's glasses. Yes, it shouldn't be too hard, but it wouldn't last very long. That's why she had chosen to enchant glasses instead of Nix's eyes directly. With glasses she could attach other spells to ensure the magic was resilient and long-lasting. Yes, in theory the illusion spell could be applied straight to Dash's eyes. It was no big deal, she just had to use it on a live pony with the opposite effect. She could do it maybe. Closing her own eyes, Twilight focused her magic. She gritted her teeth, concentrated, and felt the flash of the spell going off. For a moment, she didn't dare to look. She feared that the spell hadn't manifested, and she had just made a fool of herself in front of her friends. But the gasps of amazement from the other ponies encouraged Twilight to open her eyes, and she was relieved to find that her spell had worked. Dash's eyes had been transformed and now looked very dragon-like. They had strong irises with dagger-shaped pupils, and even the whites of her eyes had been tinted a light pink. Whoa, this is so awesome, Dash said, catching her reflection in a nearby wall mirror. Well, don't get used to it. The illusion spell will wear off quickly, Twilight lectured. Yeah, I hear ya, Dash said as she looked away from the mirror. Still, I'm going to enjoy this while it lasts. After we're done here, we have to find Pinkie Pie. She is so going to freak out when she sees this. Yeah, I suppose she will, Applejack agreed. I reckon all you little fillies have worked up quite the appetite with all this actin'. How about we catch up with Fluttershy and Pinkie and then all go get dinner together? Yeah, the fillies cheered in unison. Sounds good, Twilight agreed. Why don't you go on ahead and find us a place to eat? I need to help Nix out of her costume. The others nodded in agreement and headed off stage to begin their search for food. Twilight waited until her friends were out of sight before she turned, arched an eyebrow, and tapped her hoof as she gazed expectantly at Nix. I'm in trouble, aren't I? Nix asked. Yes, you are. You did disobey me, Twilight said firmly, though the frown on her face was soon replaced by a smile. But, you were right. It wasn't fair of me to try and keep you from the play, and you did do a good job. Really? Yes, really, Twilight reassured as she nuzzled Nix before stepping back. But now, would you mind telling me why I can see your real wings and why you don't have your glasses? Nix sat down and began to trace circles on the floor with her hoof. Well, when I was trying to get my costume on, I kind of broke the costume wings. I've been keeping my wings up like this all night though, so no pony has been able to tell the difference. And the glasses. I forgot them, Nyx admitted. Cheerily thought you must have cast a spell on my eyes since you're so good with magic. Well, if there was a night to forget your glasses, this was it, Twilight said with a chuckle. Now why don't you get on my back? We'll use my teleport spell to get back to the library. Then we'll get you out of that costume, get your glasses and vest, and come back so we can eat dinner with the others. Really? You aren't going to make me stay at the library. Kind of pointless now that the play is over, Twilight remarked. So, no, you can come back with me and have dinner with every pony. Nyx gave a wide smile as she hopped up onto Twilight's back. Thank you, Twilight. And then we'll discuss your punishment in the morning. Nyx flattened her ears, realizing she had not gotten off the hook. Oh, okay. Tilda. But Daddy, how could they cheer louder for her? She was the bad mare, and I was Princess Celestia. Diamond Tiara, please be quiet and eat your dinner, Affluent scolded. Diamond Tiara's and Silver Spoon's families were seated together at one of Ponyville's cafes. The restaurant was a fair distance from the spring festival, so it wasn't too crowded. The parents had chatted lightly about the performance, but had long since moved on to other topics despite Diamond Tiara's continued desire to keep whining about what had happened. The worst of it was that Diamond Tiara hadn't been able to escape Nyx. Within 20 minutes of her family's arrival at the restaurant, Nyx had arrived with Scootaloo, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and a bunch of other, older ponies. Now, the large group was laughing and chatting at the far end of the restaurant despite the many dirty looks Diamond Tiara had shot in their direction. Oh, look, honey, Affluent whispered, drawing Filthy Rich's as well as Diamond Tiara's attention. The whole restaurant, in fact, had turned their heads to watch as Princesses Celestia and Luna walked into the restaurant. I wonder what brings them to this quaint little eatery. It's not exactly what I would consider royal class, Silver Spoon's mother whispered. Well, isn't it obvious? They were so enamored by our daughter's performances that they came looking for them. Now, every pony, look your best, Silver Spoon's father assured, and soon the 4 adults and 2 fillies were doing just that. They quickly primped and preened themselves as the princesses began to walk in their direction. However, despite Diamond Tiara's wide grin, the princesses strolled right on by as if they weren't even there. Where are they going? Diamond Tiara whispered harshly as she turned around in her seat. No, they aren't, they are. They're sitting with those losers. Diamond Tiara, hush. It isn't our place to judge who the princesses sit with, Affluent scolded. But it isn't fair. I actually had to dress up and put on a real costume to look like Princess Celestia. Nyx didn't have to do anything but put on some fake wings to look like Nightmare Moon. Filthy Rich opened his mouth to tell his daughter to be quiet, but, as he did, he looked over his shoulder and caught a glance of the filly in question. She does look a great deal like Nightmare Moon, doesn't she? Like, totally. She didn't have to even dye her coat or mane or anything. Those are her natural colors. It isn't even fair. Diamond Tiara's father just kept staring, his blue eyes flashing a bit before he turned back to the table. Yes, it's an uncanny resemblance. Tilda. Well, Twilight yawned, that was a long night. She had just arrived back at the library. Both Spike and Nyx were sprawled out across her back and sleeping soundly. It was cute to see them like that. The cuteness, however, didn't make them any lighter. Twilight was worn out after carrying them back from the restaurant. Aloysius gave a welcoming hoot when Twilight came in the door, and she returned his welcome with a nod. She moved to and climbed the library staircase, carrying Spike and Nyx up to the bedroom. Spike was the first to get tucked in. He mumbled something about rarity and donuts before he turned over and snuggled into his blanket. Nyx was next, and Twilight gently slipped her out of her vest and glasses before tucking her beneath the covers. Then, with the two tucked away, Twilight turned to head downstairs, only to hear a small voice call out to her. Twilight. Sorry, Nyx. I didn't mean to wake you, Twilight apologized. She turned back to see Nyx's bright eyes staring at her in the dark. It's okay. Thank you for letting me go to dinner with every pony. Twilight moved back over beside Nyx's bed and made sure she was properly tucked in. You're welcome. Now, you should get some sleep. You've had a long day. Okay, Nyx whispered hesitantly, but Twilight. Yes. Nyx looked down at her hooves and anxiously fiddled with her blanket. You remember what happened in the forest, that thing I remembered or dreamed about in the castle, how I wanted to hurt you? Yes, I remember, Twilight answered with a nod. Nyx paused and swallowed nervously, was that Nightmare Moon's memory? Twilight glanced away from Nyx and rubbed the back of her neck. What makes you ask that? When I was on stage, when I was saying my last lines, I remember that I heard those same words in that nasty memory, Nix confessed. Then I started saying them just like the nasty voice I heard did, and it was like I had really said them before. Was what I acted out in the play, was it really the same thing Nightmare Moon did? Twilight froze for a moment, debating how to answer the question. She had been striving to try and protect Nix from what she feared was the truth. Yet, after the long day, Twilight didn't have the mental strength to try and contrive some new lie to shield Nix, who was too smart for anything overly simple. In the end, Twilight could only nod. And when I went to the play, every pony kept telling me that I looked just like Nightmare Moon, Nix stammered. They said my eyes were perfect and so were my wings. They thought they were fake, but they're not. And I don't know of any pony else besides the princesses who's an alicorn like me either. And before the play started, I saw that book again and looked at the picture, and after hearing what every pony else said, Nix tried to brush away some tears that had formed in her eyes and looked up at Twilight. Is the reason I remember that night, remember you, and remember wanting to hurt you, is the reason that I look like Nightmare Moon, is it because am I somehow? No, Twilight said firmly but comfortingly. You are not Nightmare Moon. But, what about? Twilight gently shushed Nix and sat down beside the small bed before gathering her thoughts. Nix, I know you may not understand all of this, but I think you deserve to know the truth, or, at least, what I think the truth is. You remember where I found you in the Everfree Forest? How, at the time, you didn't have any memories before then? How you didn't even have a name? Nix nodded silently. Twilight exhaled, trying to figure out how to word her explanation properly. Well, I think that is because that was where you were born and because you had only come into existence a few hours before I arrived. You weren't even a pony until that first moment you woke up tangled in that bush. What do you mean? Stammered Nix. Nix, I believe you were created by a spell. A spell? Nix asked, her eyes wide with confusion. Twilight nodded. You see, there were some very mean, very evil ponies who I believe were trying to bring Nightmare Moon back. Nix sat up in her bed, pulling the covers up to her neck. Why would they do that? I don't know, but that's what I think they were trying to do. They ponanapped me, and, while I wasn't able to really see or hear what was going on, I know what I felt. When they started to cast the spell, I felt powerful magic I have only sensed once before, when I was in the presence of the real Nightmare Moon. So, if my theory is correct, they were trying to bring Nightmare Moon back. They were actually able to start the spell, but then Princess Celestia arrived and stopped the mean ponies. She interrupted the spell, rescued me, and her guards arrested all who were involved. And that's where I came from. Nix asked cautiously. The thing about magic is that if you interrupt a spell, you can't really be sure what you'll get, Twilight explained. The spell wasn't complete when it was interrupted, and I think you're the result. I found you right next to the same clearing where the spell was cast. At this, Nix began to sniffle, tears already starting to stream down her face as she bit her lower lip. But that means, I'm Nightmare Moon. No, Nix, you're not. But you said that IC came from that spell. Nix blubbered, her crying turning into full-fledged sobbing. And you said that spell was supposed to bring back Nightmare Moon. If that spell made me, and I look like Nightmare Moon, and I have her memories, then I must be. The tears Nix had been trying to hold back came flooding out and she wailed, I'm Nightmare Moon. I was the one that did all those bad things in the play. I banished Princess Celestia to the sun and hit those poor guards with lightning. I broke the elements and tried to hurt you and your friends. I'm a monster. I'm a bad pony. Before Nix could continue her breakdown, Twilight brought her head close and nuzzled Nix's neck while she used a hoof to gently rub Nix's back. Nix responded by hooking her little front legs around Twilight's neck, hugging her tightly, and continuing to sob. Nix, you are not Nightmare Moon, Twilight assured, her voice both comforting and firm. But you do look like her, and you do seem to have some of her memories, Twilight admitted, but Nix, you are not Nightmare Moon. What you are is a perfectly normal, wonderful, little filly. A sweet little filly that likes going to school and was willing to get in big trouble just so she didn't let her classmates down. Twilight gently pulled herself out of Nix's hug and began to wipe away some of Nix's tears. Nightmare Moon wouldn't do any of that. She wouldn't even have friends. Nightmare Moon was a bitter, vengeance-driven pony who was willing to doom Equestria to eternal night just because ponies didn't stay up to look at the stars. And that isn't you, Twilight continued. You aren't the same pony. You are not Nightmare Moon, and you never will be. Nix sniffed loudly. You promise. I promise, Twilight assured as she nuzzled Nix once more. This drew a smile from Nyx, but the moment of happiness was doomed to die quickly as a fresh frown and new tears appeared on her face. What's wrong? Twilight asked. If I was created by a spell, then that means I don't have a mom and dad, I don't have a family like my friends, I. Twilight winced, realizing too late that Nyx had figured out more than she wanted her to. She had to think fast, she didn't want Nyx to have to go to sleep with the knowledge she was born from a spell in the forest and that she had no real family. That was just too much to put on her, at least all at once. Nyx, just because you weren't born like a normal pony doesn't mean you don't have a family. Nyx rubbed her tear-streaked face with a hoof. It doesn't. No, you have all the family you could want right here in Ponyville, Twilight reassured her. Family is more than just the ponies you're related to. Family can also be your friends and the ponies who care about you. After all, don't you have really great friends? I do. And there are plenty of others who care about you too. Just look at Spike. He's practically your brother. Nyx frowned again, though this time in confusion. But Spike is a dragon, how can he be my brother? Well, Twilight paused, needing to find the right words. Spike keeps an eye on you when I can't, and he really appreciates it when you help around the library. I know sometimes he teases you and gives you a hard time, but he only does it in good fun. I also promise he'd be among the first to jump up and help if you were ever in trouble. There's also Aloysius. While he's my second assistant and pet, he also helps look after you. He brings you those little flowers and other presents once in a while and helps you with your homework when I don't have the time. He even got himself in trouble so you could go to the play. Then there's Pee-wee, Twilight continued. You spoil him with treats when Spike isn't looking, and he loves you for that. He even let you have one of his feathers for show until one day. So, even though Aloysius is an owl, Pee-wee is a phoenix, and Spike is a dragon, they treat you like you're part of our family. Nyx tilted her head to side, contemplating what she had been told. But if Aloysius and Pee-wee are pets, and Spike is my older brother, what does that make you? Twilight felt the air catch in her lungs at the question that had just been posed to her. What was she to Nyx? What was Nyx to her? She could easily say she was just an older sister like Spike was a brother, but that didn't feel right. Applejack was an older sister to Apple Bloom. Rarity was an older sister to Sweetie Belle. Both of her friends had shared some responsibility in raising their younger sisters. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle got on Applejack and Rarity's nerves from time to time, and, once in a while, Applejack and Rarity had to rein in Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle. They had sisterly relationships. But that wasn't the kind of relationship she had with Nyx. Twilight began to think of all the things she had done for Nyx since her arrival. She had sent her to school, read bedtime stories to her, made her meals. She helped Nyx catch up to the rest of her class and tended to Nyx when she was hurt. Most of all, Twilight thought of the day Nyx got lost in the Everfree Forest because of Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. Twilight had never been so furious or worried. She was really on the verge of turning those spoiled little brats into cacti. And, yes, one could argue protecting a filly with such force was something a big sister would do. Applejack would have probably beaten the tar out of Affluent for trying to defend what Diamond Tiara had done. But sister just didn't seem to fit. Twilight felt Nyx was more to her than a sister. Nyx depended on her. If it weren't for her, Nyx could have easily died in the Everfree Forest. No, Twilight was no older sister to Nyx, but there was another name that seemed to fit, one that slowly floated to the top of Twilight's mind. Well, Nyx, if I was really honest, I'd say that I'm, the words caught in her throat, and Twilight swallowed to force down the knot before saying, I'm like, well, your mother. The word hung in the air, and, to Twilight, it felt like the rest of the library had gone silent. She watched Nyx, gauging her reaction as it moved through several stages. First Nyx looked shocked. Her mouth hung open in disbelief. Then, slowly, a weak but honest smile formed. You really want to be my mom? I'd love to be your mother if you'd let me, Twilight said, leaning her head in close so she was at eye level with Nyx. Nyx's answer was not in word but in gesture. She sat up in her bed, and, before Twilight knew it, Nyx was once again hugging her neck. She nuzzled the side of Twilight's face, and her voice trembled a little as she whispered, I would love to have you as my mom. You're the best mom ever. Twilight's lip trembled, and her eyes started to tear up even though she was smiling ear to ear. She brought her own hooves up and returned Nyx's embrace. The pair remained like that for several seconds until finally Nyx once more whispered quietly to Twilight. I love you, Twilight. I love you too, Nyx, Twilight replied as tears started to roll down her cheeks. She gently pulled herself away, quickly rubbing the tears off her face with her forelegs before using her magic to tuck Nyx back into bed. Now, it's time to go to sleep. Okay, Nyx replied before she yawned and snuggled into her bed. Twilight smiled and, thinking of her own mother, bent forward and gave Nyx a gentle kiss on the forehead as she drifted off to sleep. Sighing contentedly, Twilight stepped back from the bed and moved towards the door as quietly as she could. It wasn't the way she had expected to be called Mom for the first time. She had always thought she'd have a husband and a filly of her own someday. It had never occurred to her that Nyx could become so important to her. Still, Twilight realized that she had really been acting like Nyx's mom for a long time. She had been reading her to sleep at night and made sure she went to school. She had run into the everfree forest and nearly turned Diamond Tiara into a cactus, all for Nyx. Yeah, she'd been acting like it, but it was a whole other bucket of hay to actually be called Mom. Twilight would think about that in a minute. First, she needed to go have a word with Aloysius about why he had let Nyx sneak out to the play. Yet before Twilight could reach the door, a voice whispered to her. Hey, why am I just the older brother? Can't I be her uncle or something? Twilight turned and smiled across the room at Spike. He was sitting up in his bed, arms crossed over his chest as he eyed Twilight. Spike, I was the one who hatched you, and I helped raise you before you could talk and look after yourself. Also, technically speaking, you're still a baby dragon, and that kind of makes me your mother too. PFFT. Whatever, I still say I'd make a better uncle, Spike stated before bringing his claws to his face. Especially if you let me have that awesome mustache back. No uncle is complete without a mustache. Sorry, Spike, no mustache. Now you should get some sleep. Yeah, I heard you the first time, Mom, Spike scoffed before he lay back down and threw the blanket back over himself. He was asleep almost instantly, and Twilight couldn't help but giggle quietly as she crept out of the bedroom and headed downstairs. Aloysius, can I have a word with you? Hoo-hoo. Oh, is right, mister, Twilight firmly asserted. Equals 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 equals. Questions, comments, concerns. pen.stroke.pony@gmail.com. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Copyright Hasbro. I do not own the intellectual properties this fan fiction is based on. Click here for the Past Sins version archive. Equals 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 equals. 7. Careful Maneuvering. Past Sins. By Pen Stroke. Assisted by Batty Gloom. Equals 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 equals. Chapter 7. Careful Maneuvering. Equals 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 equals. Dear revered brother Nexus, high prophet of the true queen. I hope this letter finds you well, brother Nexus, for I have both good and bad news that needs to be brought to your attention. First, in regard to your orders, our search of the everfree forest is still ongoing. We have yet to find any real traces of our queen, and, recently, even the lingering portions of her aura at the ancient castle have dissipated. But this past evening, I became aware of a filly that has been living in town that bears, if I may say, a striking resemblance to our queen. The filly in question, Nyx, is currently in the care of Twilight Sparkle. Yes, the same Twilight Sparkle we are all so familiar with. I first saw her at an elementary school play, and I saw her a second time that evening when she shared a meal with Twilight Sparkle, the princesses, and a number of other local mares and fillies. After speaking with my daughter, who shared a class with the filly for a number of weeks, I've come to discover that the filly was admitted as a new student to Ponyville Elementary around the same time our spell was cast, near the beginning of spring. While this news alone is promising, I have been unable to learn anything else. Due to an incident, which was made worse thanks to my darling wife, I am now at odds with Twilight Sparkle. Also, my daughter, who might have proved useful in this matter, has made herself just as unwelcome around the Golden Oaks Library. Thus, I'm reaching out for your guidance, brother Nexus, in how you wish me to proceed. I patiently await your reply. For the night eternal for Equestria's true queen honored brother rich prophet of Ponyville. The scroll, which had been hoof delivered to the manor, lay across the desk in Spell Nexus's study. Nexus himself was standing near one of his windows, horn glowing as he held a glass of fine orange juice. He gently swished the glass, and its contents danced under the gentle motions. His turquoise eyes focused on the moon, which was a beautiful crescent in the sky. A filly, Nexus whispered to himself before sipping from the glass. A filly who attends school, who lives with Twilight Sparkle, who was seen in the presence of Princess Celestia, no less. A filly who participated in a school play of all things. A filly, it is not what I would have expected. What are your plans, what are your schemes? Nexus asked, as if posing his questions to the moon itself. Do you act to keep your enemies close? Do you seek to find a weakness to exploit? Do you bide your time until you can overcome the elements of harmony and the ponies who wield them? Nexus drank from the glass again, draining every drop. The glow about his horn grew just a bit brighter as he took hold of a large, elegant pitcher on the nearby table. From it, he poured more orange juice and refilled his cup. He then resumed swirling the contents of his glass as he set the pitcher down and returned to the window. Perhaps you are merely waiting for us, your children, to discover you. Is that your plan, my queen? Do you wish us to prove ourselves capable and deserving of your grace? Nexus mused, crossing the room. Though, I assume much taking filthy rich at his word. This filly may resemble Nightmare Moon, but a resemblance is not enough. No doppelganger will do. Nexus sighed as he neared his reading table, on which he set down his glass. In any case, this warrants further investigation. A book floated out from the shelves, gripped by Nexus's levitation magic. Yet, what Nexus sought was tucked behind it. It was a small black book, which floated from its hiding place in the shelves. Nexus then returned the first book to its place while his magic laid the small one out on the writing desk. Nexus opened the book, revealing pages filled with names etched out in his own hoof writing. It was the only true record of the children of Nightmare, the only record of all the ponies who had sworn strength, magic, and life to the return of Equestria's true queen. It was his duty alone to guard such precious information, for, if such a list were to be found by Celestia, all their hopes would be lost. As his turquoise eyes flowed across the names, Nexus began to ponder what his next move would be. He would need agents that could travel to the small town of Ponyville and verify Filthy Rich's reports. He would need ponies he trusted, ones like Grey Gale, Night Wind, and Stonewall. He would need ponies who were not just honored brothers and sisters, but ponies among the exalted. Those who were just below him in the order. He, the one and only revered brother of the children of Nightmare. Other books began to make their way off the shelves, cradled by levitation magic, as Nexus began checking information. Every move made by the children of Nightmare had to be planned with such care, for his opponent in this high-stakes game of chess was none other than Celestia herself. He faced a mare with 1,000 years of rule and wisdom behind her, a mare who had unearthed less thoroughly thought-out plans during the cult's infancy. He'd spread his agents like a fine powder, sprinkling them amongst the ponies of Ponyville. They'd start by simply watching. Then others would try to get closer so they could sample her magic and her nature. Then, sir. Nexus looked up from his work and saw proper etiquette had poked his nose in the study doorway. Yes. Etiquette stepped in through the door and walked over to Nexus. He held out a scroll, which was bound shut with a purple ribbon and a silver full moon seal. There is another letter for you, sir. Thank you, Etiquette, Nexus replied as he took the scroll with his own magic. Will you be needing anything else, sir? Nexus shook his head. No, not at the moment. Very good, sir. With that, Etiquette bowed respectfully before he turned and removed himself from the room. Nexus watched and waited until proper etiquette had left before he began setting down the many books he had pulled off the shelf. He propped open the books on the floor so he could quickly resume his work once the letter had been attended to. The scroll was bound with a purple ribbon and a silver seal. It was the sign of a letter from a brother or sister. The full moon on the seal indicated it was of the utmost importance. Dear revered brother Nexus, High Prophet of the True Queen. This is a written report on the comings and goings of the unicorns assigned by Princess Celestia to study and understand the nature of the resurrection spell we attempted. I realize this report comes fairly soon after my last and that you did not expect it for several days. There have been, however, a few developments I believe you would want to know about without delay. First, with the research team moved to the Royal Archives, their endeavors in understanding our spell have started to make steady headway. They have begun to decipher the arcane lines we use to augment and focus the magic in the Everfree Forest clearing. While I will act, as I have to try and stall their efforts, I can at this point only slow their progress. They will, in time, decipher the spell. Second, Princess Celestia came to the research team this morning to check on the progress. They reported to her exactly as I have reported to you, that their progress has now become steady and dependable. Bastian Yorsets and Celestia then began to chat casually. The princess talked about the spring festival she attended yesterday evening with her sister in Ponyville. She spoke highly of many of the performances and offered particular praise for a play put on by the town's elementary school. At this point, the princess divulged to Bastian Yorsets that her student, Twilight Sparkle, was now taking care of a young filly by the name of Nyx. The only description she offered was that the filly was a black-coated unicorn and that the filly was also a half-cousin. I would have dismissed this as idle chatter if Bastian Yorsets hadn't made a very interesting comment. He divulged that he had grown up knowing Twilight's father. He had even written a letter of recommendation, at the father's request, to help her secure an invitation to take the entrance exam for Celestia's school for gifted unicorns. In his comments, Bastian admitted it was strange that Twilight had called Nyx a half-cousin. According to Bastian, while Twilight's father has siblings, her mother is an only child. He further pointed out that Twilight's father and his siblings all share the same two parents, making it impossible for Twilight to have any half-cousins. Princess Celestia's reply to this was that Twilight must have misspoken when introducing Nyx, or that she had a misunderstanding of what a half-cousin was. Bastian accepted this answer, and soon their meeting was over. Again, I would have believed this to be nothing but idle chatter. Yet, later that day in the barracks, I overheard Princess Celestia's private guards talking. The two Pegasi were discussing the princess's day, and, after eavesdropping for a time, I discovered that the princess made an unscheduled stop on her daily routine. She went to the Equestria Central Records office, during what was supposed to be her lunch hour. From the ponies there she requested that family records pertaining to Twilight Sparkle be delivered to her royal chambers this evening. I was unable to discover more, since my shift had ended, and I dare not risk lingering around the castle after work. Thus, this is all I have to report. I will continue my observation of the research team, and will alert you if I discover anything pressing. I will submit my next regular report at the scheduled time. For the night eternal for Equestria's true queen exalted sister Night Wind. Nexus licked his lips to wet his mouth, which had gone dry. The situation had become much more perilous. Just as his attention had been brought to the filly in Ponyville, so had Celestia's gaze. Her interest had been spurred by the blabbermouth Bastian Yorsets. Of course, he would have to have been a childhood friend of Twilight's father. Taking up the orange juice glass, Nexus tilted it up to his mouth and drained it with a few swift gulps. He then shook his head, fighting back the brain freeze the chilled juice had incurred before refocusing on the task at hoof. There was now a need for both subtlety and haste. The truth about who the filly truly was needed to be ascertained before Celestia could act in a way to make such investigation impossible. The books that had been left on the floor were carried back into the air by Nexus's magic. He drew out a feather pen and several pieces of parchment. Then Nexus began to feverishly work. His eyes moved between the little black record book, the many other tomes that now encircled him, and the pieces of parchment he was scrawling partial plans out on. Spell Nexus would get no sleep that night. Tilde. Twilight yawned, making no effort to control or stifle it as she walked down the path to Ponyville Elementary. The sun was still rising from the horizon, and the sunrise's tapestry of colors was just starting to fade to the constant blue of midday. Normally, it would have taken an important research trip to make Twilight get out of bed this early. That was, however, before Nyx came into her life. Now it was not an expedition to some far-off archaeological site or a rare celestial event that drew Twilight from her warm bed covers. It was a far simpler event that, to a certain little filly, was nearly as important. A few days after the spring festival, Cheerilee announced that she wanted to try something new for the school. It was a Saturday event where students would set up educational exhibits and the school would host food and games, something Cheerilee was playfully calling, Learn and Play Day. It was an event that had quickly grown, even Ponyville schools for older students were more than eager to join in. It was because the event had grown so quickly that Cheerilee had called on Twilight, Ponyville's #1 organizer, to help get everything in order. Twilight had been working alongside the teacher for the past 2 weeks to plan the event while the students researched and built their educational exhibits. It had turned into quite a lot of work, but it was worth it. Nyx had only grown more excited as the Learn and Play Day drew closer. Approaching the schoolhouse, Twilight walked around the brightly painted building to the open field behind it. There, Cheerilee was working with a few other volunteers to get everything set up. Tables, chairs, colorful strings of flags, and numerous signs decorated the grassy field behind the school, making it almost as inviting as the schoolhouse itself. Good morning, every pony, Twilight greeted. She attempted to put on a smile as well, but it was ruined when she was gripped by another yawn. Not much for mornings, Cheerily teased as she walked over to meet Twilight. Twilight covered her mouth with a hoof, and laughed through the end of her yawn. Not usually, no. Well, thank you for coming out and giving everything one final check over before the big day. Every pony seems so excited. This little weekend may turn into a new Ponyville tradition if it goes off right. Well, let's get through today first before we start planning for next year, Twilight said. She opened her saddlebags and floated a checklist with a pencil into the air. Now, let's see. Are the exhibit tables set up? Cheerily nodded and pointed a hoof to the area just behind the school. Several circular tables had been borrowed or rented from a number of ponies around Ponyville. Each one was covered in a white tablecloth and bore a pair of numbered signs. 30 round tables with tablecloths and 60 exhibit signs on yellow paper. Perfect, Twilight replied. She made a check on her list and started to look around the area the pair were standing in. What about food? We're just about to finish setting up the tables for our little food court. Big Macintosh has brought in a food cart from Sweet Apple Acres. That just leaves Danver and the Cakes, who need to arrive and set up their food stalls. Danver. His family owns and runs the carrot farm next to Sweet Apple Acres. Oh, Twilight said before she lifted a hoof to her mouth to mask a giggle. Let me guess, Danver is a type of carrot. You'd be guessing right, Cheerily replied with a chuckle of her own. Then I'd say the food and eating area is all taken care of, Twilight commented before she checked the next item of her list. That just leaves the afternoon activities. Still, I doubt we'll be able to mark that one off just yet. Why do you say that? Well, we put Rainbow Dash in charge of that. She's reliable, but she likes to procrastinate. I wouldn't be surprised if she was still back at home, snoozing away the morning. Boo. Twilight quickly turned her head to the side, a little startled by the sudden addition of a third voice to the conversation. It was only then that she noticed the sky blue Pegasus hovering in the air near her head. Cheerily had to cover her mouth to keep herself from laughing as Rainbow Dash looked at Twilight with a smug grin. Back at home snoozing, huh? Twilight laughed nervously, forcing a smile. Rainbow Dash, I didn't expect you to be here this early. Rainbow chuckled, landed next to Twilight, and folded her wings. Relaxed, Twee. On any normal day, I would still be asleep, but this is just going to be too awesome. I just had to get up early, not only to clear the skies, but to make sure all my cool sporting events were ready. What do you have planned, anyway? Cheerily asked. I've been too busy making sure the student exhibits would be ready to keep up with everything else that's been going on. Oh, tons of stuff. Rainbow Dash energetically answered. When I was at Twilight's library last week, I checked out a book with a whole bunch of killer ideas and now I've got something for every pony. Got things for just the kids to do, things for kids to do with their parents, and things for the parents to do so the kids can cheer them on. We've got games for Pegasi, for Earth ponies, for unicorns, and games where you get to mix it up. It is all just going to be so awesome. Quote. Wow, that sounds like a lot, Twilight said, unable to hide how impressed she was. Rainbow Dash smiled smugly, lifted a hoof, and brushed it against her chest. Yeah, I pretty much outdid myself. And, since we got so many ponies to volunteer their time and things for free, Cheerily began as she reached under a nearby table and pulled out a box. I actually was able to spend the last of the budget on some prizes for your. Cheerily didn't even get to finish what she was saying. Without a word of warning, Rainbow zipped forward, stuck her head in the box, and began to rummage around inside with a gleeful squeak. You got prizes? Quote. Yes I did. And good prizes too, Dash commented with her head still inside the box. There's some choice stuff in here. Oh cool, yo-yos. At that, Rainbow Dash pulled her head out of the box with a yo-yo pinched gingerly in her teeth. In a flash, its string was around her hoof. Then, with an expert flick, Rainbow Dash sent the little plastic disc up and down the string in a smooth motion. Another flick and the yo-yo was in a simple sleeper trick, where it stayed at the bottom of the string but continued to spin. Hey, I used to be pretty good at this, Dash bragged as she flicked her hoof to bring the yo-yo out of the sleeper trick. Rainbow Dash then gave the toy a few more flicks to build speed before she wrapped some of the string around her hooves, resulting in the yo-yo swinging back and forth inside a triangle of string. This here is called the pendulum. That's great, Rainbow, but shouldn't you leave the prizes for the ponies who actually win them? Twilight asked. Sure, just one more trick. You heard of around the world? Well, this is my super, double loop, around the sun trick. With that, Dash gave the yo-yo a firm flick, jumped into the air, and used her wings to spin herself. A few seconds after starting the trick, Dash flopped to the ground, hog-tied in the string. cheerily, and Twilight couldn't help but burst out laughing as Dash struggled to free herself from the string. Oh wow, Rainbow Dash, that was really something, Twilight deadpanned. Yeah, laugh it up. Now, are you two going to just stand there giggling, or are you going to lend me a hoof? Tilde. The Learn and Play Day was in full swing the moment it opened to the public at 9 o'clock that morning. The students had set up their exhibits, and each exhibit had been done on a different topic of interest. There were exhibits about farming techniques, about history, about how weather was made, and dozens of other topics that usually caught the interest of school-age fillies and colts. That was the learn part of the Learn and Play Day. The students learned more about subjects they wanted to know more about, and some parents and other ponies in the community had a chance to learn as well. Isn't this so super duper fun, Fluttershy? Pinkie Pie chirped as she bounced along between the student exhibits while Fluttershy walked calmly beside her. I mean, I knew cotton candy was good, and I knew how to make it. Still, I never knew how little pieces of sugar turned into stringy sweet goodness. Fluttershy nodded. Yes, that was a really interesting display. Which one's been your favorite so far? Pinkie asked excitedly. Fluttershy shrank slightly under Pinkie's undivided attention. Well, I liked the one about how caterpillars become butterflies. I already knew about that, but the student did such a wonderful job explaining it. All the kids did a really good job, Pinkie Pie agreed before her eyes lit up. Oh, I wish I could have an exhibit. I'd do one about parties. Fluttershy blinked. Parties. Parties aren't as easy as every pony thinks. There are lots of rules I have to follow for my parties, the Pinkie Pie party rules, Pinkie stated matter-of-factly. Really? Fluttershy asked in disbelief as the pair continued to move through the crowd. I would never imagine you actually had rules for your parties. Of course. How do you think they turn out so good? I have rules I can never ever break. And, as long as any pony else doesn't break them, the party is a guaranteed success. Like, rule number 1, every party must have decorations, or rule number 157, if the ratio of fillies and colts to mares and stallions is at least 2-to-1, there must be a piñata. Fluttershy couldn't help but tilt her head to one side and arch an eyebrow. Rule number 157. How many rules are there? 376, Pinkie replied nonchalantly. Oh my, that's a lot of rules. For a brief moment Pinkie Pie stopped bouncing, and her usually happy expression turned stone cold. Hey, throwing parties is my special talent, and it is serious business to make them seriously fun. Pinkie Pie's normal, cheerful demeanor returned a moment later. She then scanned the exhibits, looking for the next one she and Fluttershy would visit. Oh, hey, there's Nyx's booth. We should go see what she did. Pinkie Pie bounced ahead, forcing Fluttershy to break into a quick trot just to catch up. A group of stallions and mares were just stepping away from Nyx's booth when the pair of mares came up. Hi Fluttershy, Nyx said with a wide smile, one that withered a little as Nyx turned to look at the, at times, overwhelming pony that stood beside Fluttershy. Hi, Pinkie Pie. Hey there, Nyx, Pinkie Pie chirped. What super cool, amazing thing did you do for your exhibit? Give us the whole rundown. If you don't mind, that is, Fluttershy added, trying to curb Pinkie Pie's enthusiasm. Oh, of course not, it's, Nyx stated, before she coughed into her hoof to clear her throat. I chose to make my exhibit about transfiguration magic. Pinkie tilted her head, confused but still excited. Transfigure what? Transfiguration. It's the magic that focuses on turning one thing into another. Nyx pointed to a number of pictures she had set up on the cardboard backdrop of her exhibit. Transfiguration magic can be used to transform practically anything into anything else. Like a stick into a fancy walking cane. Or a stone into a hat. Or even an apple into a horse-drawn carriage. Transfiguration magic is only limited by the skill and the ability of the pony casting it. Skilled unicorns, such as Rarity, can use transfiguration to turn fabric into a dress, and Twilight Sparkle is able to transfigure 4 common mice into 4 full-sized horses. Hey, I remember that. Pinkie Pie said with a giggle. They didn't exactly look like horses. Nyx stammered a moment, trying to recover from Pinkie Pie's interruption. And that leads me to the next part of my exhibit, the limits of transfiguration magic. Transfiguration magic is always temporary. Everything transfigured will eventually turn back to normal. This is why anything that needs to be permanent is still hoof-made, like houses and clothing. Otherwise there wouldn't be a need for construction workers, carpenters, or any other ponies who make things. And, as a final part of my exhibit, I would like to provide a live demonstration of transfiguration magic. Nyx pointed to the rock sitting on the table at the center of her exhibit. She then shut her eyes, her horn and the rock beginning to glow. Her face contorted with concentration, and she puffed out her cheeks as she strained her young magic. After a few tense moments, a small pop and flash of light enveloped the rock before it was turned into a potted flower. Ooh, Pinkie Pie said before she leaned in and sniffed the flower. It even smells real. Nyx smiled bashfully. So, any questions? No, none at all. That was very well done, Nyx. You should be. Fluttershy began to praise, only for Pinkie Pie to put her head in between Fluttershy and Nyx. Oh, I got a question. Have you tried changing anything bigger than a rock? Oh, do you take requests? Well, no, Nyx stammered, but I guess I could try. What did you have in mind? Turn that grass into cotton candy. Pinkie Pie said ecstatically. No, wait, turn that into a candy apple. No, wait, you should turn that stallion's bow tie into a squirty flower. Oh, no, 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 no. I know what you should try to do. Pinkie Pie was grinning ear to ear as she pointed a hoof at Fluttershy. Turn her into a tree. Nyx's head lowered and her ears flattened as she took a step back from Pinkie Pie and her manic behavior. A tree. Yeah, turn Fluttershy into a tree. Why would you want me to be a tree? Asked Fluttershy, looking incredulously at Pinkie Pie for her odd suggestion. Because, this one time, on a train, I got talking with Rainbow Dash and Twilight, and, for some strange reason, Rainbow thought you were a tree, even though you obviously aren't. But then you said you'd like to be a tree, Pinkie Pie answered Fluttershy before turning her excited blue eyes back to Nyx. So, can you turn her into a tree? I don't know. Oh, come on, just give it a try. You never know unless you try, Pinkie Pie encouraged. But Nyx tried to protest. Come on, Fluttershy doesn't mind, do you, Fluttershy? Fluttershy scratched at the ground, drawing anxious circles in the dirt. Well, you do seem really excited, so I guess I don't mind, but are you sure it's safe? We saw Twilight turn mice into horses, and she wouldn't put your animal friends in danger. Well, I guess that's true, Fluttershy admitted, and I guess it would be kind of nice to see what it's like. Yay! Pinkie Pie cheered before she looked back to Nyx. So, come on, let's see some of that unicorn magic. Nyx took a step back, shying away. Pinkie Pie, I don't know, I don't think Twilight. Ah, come on, please. It will be so totally fun. Pinkie Pie pressured as she bounced with excitement. Pinkie Pie, maybe, Fluttershy began, trying to tell her friend she was being a little overbearing. However, she didn't get to finish her sentence as she felt magic wrapping around her. Nyx had shut her eyes and focused her magic into her horn. She was making an attempt at the transfiguration spell, if only to appease the energetic Pinkie Pie. Tilda. Boy, some of these booths are really cool. Rainbow Dash said, she and Twilight trotting amongst them. I mean, did you see what Scootaloo did? She actually explained how my sonic rainboom works. I didn't even know how it worked, besides the fact that I was breaking the sound barrier. Yes, all the students have really done, Twilight began, only to be silenced as the ground shook and a loud noise cut through the air. SSSRRRRRRRRUUUGGGHHHRRRUUUGGGHHHFerg. Trurs SSTHSTTTSHH. What was that? Twilight asked once she had regained her footing from what had felt like a minor earthquake. When she got no answer, Twilight turned to look at Rainbow Dash, who was staring wide-eyed in the opposite direction. Following Rainbow's gaze, Twilight nearly choked on the air in her own lungs at what she saw. A young tree had appeared in the center of the exhibits. It was just barely as tall as the Schulhouse's roof with a trunk about as wide as a metal bucket. It was a young weeping willow, and its long, hanging branches and leaves draped across nearby exhibits. The tree, however, was very unusual, its bark was a bright yellow and all of its leaves were a light, frilly pink. Oh my gosh! You did it! Pinkie Pie's voice burst out above the crowd, drawing Rainbow Dash and Twilight out of their stupor. The two quickly raced through the network of tables and shoved their way through the crowd to reach the tree. Pinkie Pie had climbed up into the branches, hanging off one of the few branches thick enough to support her weight. Pinkie Pie, where the hay did this tree come from? Rainbow asked as she took flight to catch up to Pinkie Pie in the tree's crown. It was amazing. Nyx did it with her magic. Nyx did, Twilight said as she looked up and down the tree in disbelief before her eyes narrowed. Wait, where is Nyx? Twilight's question was answered with a whimper that emanated from beneath one of the exhibit tables. When Twilight lifted the tablecloth, she found Nyx shaking like a leaf. Her head was in her hooves, and a few tears were pulling at her eyes. Nyx, what did you, Twilight began, which only caused Nyx to break down. Twilight, I'm sorry. I didn't want to, but Pinkie Pie kept asking and Fluttershy said it was okay and I'm sorry. I didn't want to do it. Do what? Twilight asked, still unsure exactly what had happened. She turned Fluttershy into a tree. Pinkie Pie cheered. Wait, 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 hold on a sec, Dash began, pointing a hoof at the yellow and pink weeping willow. This tree right here. This tree is Fluttershy. Well duh, of course it is. I just told you that Nyx turned Fluttershy into a tree. Seriously, Rainbow Dash, I think you'd be happy. After all, you were the one that thought Fluttershy was a tree when we were on our way to Appaloosa. I did not. I was being sarcastic. Pinkie Pie flopped her head to one side. You were being sarcastic. As Rainbow Dash tried again to explain to Pinkie Pie why she had once called Fluttershy a tree, Twilight began to glance nervously around the steadily growing crowd of ponies. They were all murmuring and whispering about Nyx. Nyx picked up on the growing crowd as well and also the growing concern on Twilight's face. With another whimper, she retreated further beneath the table. I'm sorry. No, Nyx, it's okay, Twilight whispered, trying to reassure her. Just, give me one moment. At that, Twilight turned to look at the tree, and she took in a deep breath to brace herself. After the accident during her entrance exam to Celestia's school for gifted unicorns, when she had turned her own parents into potted plants, one of the first spells Twilight had been taught by the princess was a transfiguration reversal spell. Yes, a transfiguration would wear off in time, but it was also important to be able to reverse a transfiguration at a moment's notice. Closing her eyes, Twilight began to focus and her horn started to shimmer as she called on her magic. The same glow began to engulf the tree, and Rainbow Dash grabbed Pinkie Pie out of the tree's crown before Twilight completed her reversal spell. The crowd watched in awe, and the display even drew Nyx out from beneath the exhibit table. Then, after a few tense moments, the tree imploded on itself. It compressed down to a single point, and with a magical pop, Fluttershy reappeared and dropped to the ground with a small thud. Fluttershy, are you okay? Twilight asked. She quickly rushed up to help her friend back to her hooves. Why yes, Fluttershy said, though both her voice and her knees were shaking. I'm fine. Twilight breathed a sigh of relief. Good. You were never in any real danger, transfiguration magic is inherently temporary. Still, from what my parents told me, being turned into a plant can be a bit disorienting. Oh, what was it like? What was it like? Pinkie Pie asked, bouncing in excitement. It was Fluttershy began, and then paused a moment to collect her thoughts. Not only did Pinkie Pie, Twilight, and Rainbow Dash lean in to hear the answer, but any ponies nearby who had witnessed the feat of magic leaned in as well. They were all eager to hear the first hoof account of what it was like to be a tree. Nice, Fluttershy finally concluded, causing a groan of disappointment to sweep through the crowd. With a lackluster climax to the small spectacle, many of the ponies in the crowd turned to leave. Pinkie Pie, however, was unfazed. Oh, now I want to be turned into something. A rose bush, no, a balloon. No. Turn me into a cake, turn me into a. Wow, would you look at that? It's almost lunchtime, Twilight interrupted as she put a hoof against Pinkie Pie's mouth and forced a smile. Personally, I'm starved. Aren't you starved, Nyx? Of course you are, you just turned a pony into a tree. That kind of thing must really work up an appetite. Why don't we go get something to eat? Not even waiting for an answer, Twilight grabbed Nyx with a levitation spell and galloped out of the crowd of ponies. This left Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, and Rainbow Dash standing dumbfounded in the wake of Twilight's abrupt retreat. But I want to be a cake, Pinkie Pie whined in disappointment. Yet, she then perked up, scratched at her neck, and began to look around, as if searching for something. Dash took notice of her pink friend's sudden shift in mood. What's wrong, Pinkie Pie? Itchy neck, she replied. Dash arched an eyebrow. Itchy neck, wait, like twitchy tail. Pinkie Pie shook her head and got to her hooves as she continued to search the crowd. No, silly. Twitchy tail is when something is about to fall. Then what does itchy neck mean? Fluttershy asked. Some pony is watching us, Pinkie Pie answered with a low hiss. Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy just got turned into a tree, Dash pointed out before waving her hooves at the crowd. Every pony was watching us. Pinkie shook her head violently from side to side. No. That was an innocent, wow, that's a really cool thing that happened, watching. No, itchy neck is a bad kind of watching. What the hey is bad watching? Rainbow Dash questioned. Spying, Pinkie Pie hissed quietly, and the spy is that way. Without another word, Pinkie Pie was off. She galloped at a full sprint through the crowd, dodging ponies before she made a hard turn and disappeared behind a table. That left Dash and Fluttershy to anxiously glance at one another, worried about what kind of chaos Pinkie Pie was about to unleash on the learn and play day. equals 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 equals. Questions, comments, concerns. pen.stroke.pony@gmail.com. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Copyright Hasbro. I do not own the intellectual properties this fan fiction is based on. Click here for the Past Sins version archive. Equals 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 equals. 8. You Can't Hide Magic. Past Sins. By Pen Stroke. Assisted by Batty Gloom. Equals 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 equals. Chapter 8. You Can't Hide Magic. Equals 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 equals. Twilight looked on in a daze as she and Nick sat behind the apple stand where Big Macintosh was hard at work. Big Mac, in a simple but much appreciated act of kindness, had allowed the pair to hide from the crowds after the tree incident. Nix was still visibly upset about what had happened. She was, however, slowly recovering, thanks in part to the red apple Twilight had purchased for her as lunch. Yet, while Nix was recovering, Twilight's state of panic only seemed to be growing. She kept up a calm facade for Nix's sake, but that didn't stop her mind from spinning faster than Rainbow Dash could fly. Dragon-shaped eyes could be hidden with glasses. Wings could be concealed with a vest. Magic was different. Nix had almost blown her cover, and every pony at the Learn and Play Day had to be talking about what happened. Sure, it was a feat of magic Twilight herself was capable of performing, especially with her years of practice and study under Princess Celestia. She had even accomplished a similar feat of magic when she was Nix's age. She had turned her parents into potted plants. At that time, however, it was a manifestation of magic she didn't have full control of. Nix, on the other hoof, had just turned a pony into a tree on purpose, something that should have been impossible for a normal filly. A normal filly had turned a pony into a tree. No, despite what Twilight told herself and every pony else, Nix wasn't entirely normal. She was an alicorn, but not an alicorn like her old foal-sitter, Cadence. No, Cadence was only of partial royal blood, and thus a mortal alicorn. Yes, Cadence's talent for love magic was unique. In terms of sheer power, however, Twilight herself was more magically gifted. But Nix, what if Nix was different? Doubts and fears, both old and new, began to rear their ugly heads in Twilight's mind. Nix had come from the spell meant to resurrect Nightmare Moon, and Nightmare Moon was not a mortal alicorn. She was the jealousy-twisted form of Princess Luna. She was a member of the rare breed of immortal alicorns. Nightmare Moon had the power to move the moon in the sky, an act that had become impossible to even a team of unicorns after Discord's reign over the world. And Nix had been born of a spell meant to resurrect Nightmare Moon. She was likely just a young Nightmare Moon. Had she somehow inherited the gift of immortality? Would she, when she was older, be able to move the sun, the moon, or other heavenly bodies? Would she become as grand and regal as Princess Celestia? The full weight of parenthood came crashing down on Twilight. What was she getting herself into? She was taking care of Nix like a daughter, and she was barely an adult herself. That, and, for all she knew, she was raising a filly that could someday be like the princesses. How long would she be able to keep the truth hidden? Dragon-shaped eyes and wings could be disguised, but that kind of magical power. How much longer would it be before Princess Celestia heard of this prodigy in Ponyville? Even if the hiccup with turning Fluttershy into a tree was a one-time thing, what would happen as Nix got older? Would Nix's magic get more powerful? How big was she going to get? Princess Luna, after all, was only a little bigger than the average pony, but she was still the younger of the royal sisters. She could easily get bigger in time, and that made Twilight think of Princess Celestia. What if Nix grew as tall as her, and what about her mane? What if Nix's mane turned into a swirling cloud of indigo magic with stars like the real Nightmare Moon's mane? What would ponies think when they realized what Nyx was? How long would it be before the torches and pitchforks came out? How long would it be before the royal guard was hunting Nyx down? How long would it be before Princess Celestia banished Nyx to the moon? Nyx didn't deserve any of that, well, unless she was, in fact, Nightmare Moon. Twilight, you okay? Lookin' mighty pale, a deep voice on Twilight's right commented. Snapped out of her spiraling thoughts, Twilight looked up at Big Macintosh, who had a moment free from customers to check on her and Nyx. Oh, yes, sorry, I'm fine. Just a little lightheaded. You want another apple? He offered kindly. No, thank you, Twilight replied. Have they started the afternoon activities? Don't think so, but I reckon it's going to start right soon, Big Macintosh answered. The straw in his mouth twitched as he spoke. Saw Applejack and Apple Bloom heading in that direction. Are we still going to that, even after what happened? Nyx asked. Yes, we are, Twilight replied, getting to her hooves. She knew Nyx was looking forward to the afternoon activities, but the greater and unspoken reason was that Twilight was worried about what would happen if they left. After what had happened, if she and Nyx left abruptly, her friends would wonder where they went. They would then come looking for her and Nyx, and they would expect an explanation. In truth, Twilight feared leaving would only invite more unwanted attention. If they stayed, however, they could try and act like what had happened was nothing out of the ordinary. Twilight's family, after all, was known for being magically gifted. She could just act like what Nyx did was perfectly normal. This was far from the truth, but Twilight didn't have a lot of options. It was either stay at the school or retreat to the library, and the former appealed to her as the best option. Tilda. I know you're here somewhere, Spired and McSpee, Pinkie Pie whispered to herself while she surveyed the crowd of ponies moving about the lunch area and exhibits. Whoever had been watching her, Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy had slipped away once, but now Pinkie Pie knew the spy was there, and she would find him or her. Itchy neck. Pinkie Pie sharply turned her head to the right and began looking across the crowd. Her vision eventually met with a pair of brown-gray eyes that were looking back at her. It took a moment for the other pony to realize Pinkie Pie was staring right at him, but when he did, he ducked around a corner in the student exhibits. Creaky knee. Gotcha, Pinkie Pie whispered with a slightly devilish grin before breaking into a gallop. Creaky knee told her some pony was trying to get away from her, and the knee closest to the pony was the one that got creaky. It was what allowed Pinkie Pie to follow Rainbow Dash wherever she tried to hide, and, at the moment, it meant Pinkie Pie would be able to track the spy. Rounding the same corner the spy had just disappeared behind, Pinkie Pie maneuvered through the crowd and student exhibits in hot pursuit. She caught small glances of some pony moving just ahead of her. The spy knew she was onto him, but that wouldn't stop her. No pony went about being a nasty spy. Spired and McSpee, especially around her and her friends. Creaky knee front left, creaky knee front right, creaky knee front right, creaky knee back left, creaky knee front right, twingy ankle. Pinkie Pie put all four of her hooves to the ground, braked hard, and skidded to a stop. Twingy ankle, now the spy wasn't running, the spy was hiding. Pinkie's eyes narrowed, and she found herself once more on the side of the food court that had been set up for the learn and play day. There were ponies at almost every table, eating their lunches while other ponies mingled about talking and laughing. Oh, he's good, but hide and seek is one of my favorite games, Pinkie Pie whispered, before taking in a deep breath and shouting, you hear that? I'll find you. Quote. All the ponies who had been eating their meals and chatting turned to look at Pinkie Pie, most quite startled by her sudden and very loud proclamation. Still, Pinkie Pie ignored the confused stares. She scanned the crowd and eventually spotted a pony sitting alone at a table who had not turned around. He was the only stallion that hadn't turned to look at her. Her eyes fell on the back of his slicked-back navy blue mane. Gotcha, again, Pinkie Pie hissed with a menacing grin. She moved across the food court slowly, stepping between ponies as she did her best to approach the spy from behind. She circled around chatting ponies, ducked behind a baby carriage, and even hid in a bundle of balloons. Each move brought her closer to her prey. Yet, when she was within a few tables, a familiar face popped in front of her. Oh, there you are, Pinkie Pie. I was worried when you ran off, Rainbow Dash said. It's almost time to start the afternoon sports and games. You still want to help? Pinkie Pie glowered, trying to strain her neck and look around Rainbow Dash. No, I don't, because I'm tracking a pony, and eventually, she gently pushed the hovering Rainbow Dash out of the way, only to find the pony she had been creeping up on had vanished. Pinkie grunted in aggravation before turning an accusing glare onto Rainbow Dash. And you let him get away. Dash put her hooves up defensively. Whoa, sorry, I didn't mean to mess up, whatever it is you're doing. Creaky knee front right. Pinkie Pie's frown quickly turned back to a sinister smile. She turned her head in the direction of her creaky knee. Don't worry about it, Dashi. Now the spy is trying to run away from me again, and no pony can run away from Pinkamena Diane Pie. Dash cocked an eyebrow. Wait, you're still chasing this imaginary spy? Pinkie Pie offered no answer. Instead, she broke into a gallop, leaving Rainbow Dash behind as she charged across the food court. She caught sight of a navy blue tail ducking behind the front of the schoolhouse, and she broke into a full sprint to catch up. She leapt around the corner but saw no sign of the mysterious pony. Creaky knee front right, twingy ankle. Pinkie Pie smiled triumphantly as she put a hoof on the schoolhouse's front door. Oh, you silly spy. You thought you could hide in the schoolhouse, but no pony can hide from me. She pushed on the doors, throwing them open with a resounding crash. She then somersaulted once, jumped up onto her back hooves and pulled off a few karate poses as she shouted into the dark. Come out now, Spy-Spired and McSpee. I know you're in here, and you're going to tell me why you're being a big meanie and spying on me and my friends. Enough of this, a voice snarled from the back of the room. Pinkie Pie turned, her eyes meeting the same brown-gray eyes she had seen among the exhibits. Those eyes closed, then reopened with brilliant, turquoise irises. Tilde tilde tilde. All right, ponies. Rainbow Dash hollered over the remaining crowd. It's time for the last event of the day, the tug-of-war tournament. The parents and other ponies who had come out for the Learn and Play Day cheered, having formed a sizable audience around 3 tug-of-war ropes. So, here's how it's going to happen. There are teams of 4, and each team has been placed on our tournament roster. There are also 3 age groups, and teams will fit into the age group of its oldest member. The last team standing in each age group will get prizes, and then we'll let the top teams tug it out to see which one is the tug-of-war champion of the day. Now teams, report to the rope you were assigned to and let's get tugging. The fillies and colts, who had been watching near the front of the audience, all cheered and separated themselves into their age groups. At the red rope, for the youngest age group, Rarity stood with a clipboard floating gently in front of her. Cheerilee was moderating the middle-age group, and Applejack was keeping the oldest of the school-age ponies in line. All right, Rarity said in a sing-song manner above the little fillies and colts that had crowded around her. First up are the Cutie Mark Crusaders versus the Carrot Clan. Those 2 teams, get to your sides of the rope, and every pony else please stand back. The young ponies followed her directions. On one side of the rope were 3 colts and a filly, all of them with some form of a carrot-themed cutie mark, who took up the rope in their teeth. On the other side of the rope, the 4 fillies wearing bright red cutie mark Crusader capes got in line. Sweetie Belle was in the front, Scootaloo behind her. Nix, who had been officially inducted into the Cutie Mark Crusaders just after the Spring Festival, took up the 3rd position. Apple Bloom was at the end, acting as the team's anchor. Now, while I suggested that having a rope to pull across a line would have been much cleaner and safer, Rainbow Dash saw fit to use mud pits, something about it being easier to keep track of winners, Rarity mused as she looked over the colts and fillies she would be refereeing. Now, the goal is to pull all members of the other team into the mud pit. The rules are simple: if your team is whole lets go of the rope or gets pulled into the mud, then you lose. Magic is not allowed, and Pegasi must keep their hooves on the ground. Every pony understand? Rarity asked. The 2 teams nodded their heads in agreement, already starting to pull the rope taut between them. And remember, there is a wash station set up if you lose, but, well, every pony just try their best and have fun, okay? The 2 teams both stared at each other, ready to begin, and Rarity didn't waste another moment. Ready, set, go. With tightened jaws, the 2 teams pulled on the rope and began their struggle to drag the other team into the mud pit. For a moment, the Carrot Clan team had the advantage and managed to pull the Crusaders a few steps forward. Yet, the tide soon turned when Scootaloo began flapping her wings while keeping her hooves on the ground. The added force let the Crusaders regain their footing, and, soon, with a few hard pulls and 4 splashes from the other team, they had won the first match. Yay! Cutie Mark Crusader Tug of War Champions! The 4 cheered in unison before they stepped away from the rope and let the next 2 teams approach. Tilde tilde tilde. The Cutie Mark Crusaders won 2 more rounds before they reached their age group's final match, and the Crusaders couldn't be happier with whom they were facing. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had gotten 2 of the strongest colts in the age group on their team, and they reached the final match by relying on those 2 colts. Still, the Crusaders weren't about to lose to the fillies who regularly called them blank flanks, and Nick still had a score to settle with Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon for the Everfree Forest prank. Ready, set, go. Rarity shouted, and the 2 teams pulled the rope taut. Almost immediately the 2 colts on the other team began dragging the Cutie Mark Crusaders forward. They were colts just barely in the youngest age group, which gave them a noticeable physical advantage over the Crusaders. Come on. Apple Bloom grunted through the rope in her mouth. Pull. We are. Scootaloo grunted back. But our hooves are slipping. Looks like you four are going to be losers and blank flanks, Diamond Tiara heckled with a laugh. She even took her mouth off the rope since the two older colts on her team were doing all the work. We are not losers, Sweetie Belle shouted. She dug her hooves into the ground and halted her team's slow defeat just before she would have fallen into the waiting mud pit. Every pony, Apple Bloom said through the rope in her teeth, pull hard together. Ready, pull. The four crusaders put their weight into their unified tug and managed to regain some ground, each taking a single step back. Once more, Apple Bloom called, ready, pull. And again the fillies were able to reclaim a single step, slowly dragging back the older stallions. For the first time in the tournament, Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon had to do what little they could to help the two colts on their team. It was enough to stop the crusaders, but not before they had regained the ground they'd lost. It was then that the two teams entered into a tense stalemate. Neither team was able to gain an inch. Even Apple Bloom's tactic was soon rendered useless. Diamond Tiara's team had figured out the counter strategy of pulling on the rope whenever Apple Bloom shouted pull. Soon, both teams broke down to just pulling on the rope with all their strength, hoping to win the competition through brute force alone. That strategy, however, began to take its toll. My jaw is starting to hurt, Sweetie Belle mumbled out. Just hold on, we can win this, Scootaloo said, trying to pep up the team as she flapped her wings as quickly as she could. Apple Bloom nodded, huffing through her nostrils. Yeah, we just got to keep pullin'. No, we don't, Nyx grunted as the crusaders began to lose a little of their hard-earned ground. You better not be sayin' we should give up, Nyx. Apple Bloom grumbled. I'm not, Nyx stressed. I'm just saying we can't overpower them. We have to outthink them. And just how are we supposed to do that? Apple Bloom asked. Hey, I think I got an idea. Scootaloo called out before she began whispering. Her voice was just loud enough for her friends to hear, and soon her idea had been formed into a plan by Apple Bloom. It was a gamble, but the four fillies got ready as Apple Bloom began to count. 3, 2, 1, pull. Apple Bloom shouted through the rope in her teeth. Diamond Tiara's team, hearing this, quickly pulled, trying to counteract the rally tug the crusaders were about to perform. The crusaders, however, did not pull back. They instead let Diamond Tiara's team have some slack. The sudden lack of opposition threw Diamond Tiara's team off, causing the colt they had in the back to trip over his own hooves and fall to the side. This was what the crusaders had been hoping for. Apple Bloom shouted out another pull, and with one of the two big colts off his hooves, the four fillies were able to pull the rest of team into the mud puddle with a resounding splash. Match over, the Cutie Mark Crusaders win. Rarity sung out to the cheers of the crowd. No, Diamond Tiara cried out in anger as she tried to stand up in the mud pit. We were supposed to win. Diamond Tiara then tried to stomp her hoof in protest, but the slick ground beneath her caused her to lose her balance and fall back into the mud. Diamond Tiara's minor tantrum, however, only made the victory sweeter for the four Cutie Mark Crusaders. The fillies shared a victory high hoof and went to where Rainbow Dash was hovering so they could wait for the other age groups to finish. Tilda. All right, it's time for our awesome championship round, Dash announced to the applause of the crowd. The crowd had gathered around the one remaining tug of war rope, which Rainbow Dash was hovering above. It's going to be between the Cutie Mark Crusaders and the Boulders. Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Nyx all looked wide-eyed at their opponents. By some luck they had managed to beat the middle-age group champion team, but now the four little fillies were facing the Boulders, a team of four colts that were very close to being considered young adults. Now, since one team has an obvious advantage, Dash said, motioning towards the four earth ponies of the other team, we'll allow the Cutie Mark Crusaders to have an advantage as well. They can either add another pony to their team, have one unicorn be allowed to use magic, or they can pick a pony from the Boulders to sit out. The Crusaders huddled up, and Apple Bloom quickly offered her opinion. We should ask my big sister to join our team. No, wait, we should ask Big Macintosh to be on our team. I bet he could beat those four big ponies all by himself. No, I want to beat these colts ourselves, Scootaloo argued, taking a moment to poke her head out of the huddle and glared at the other team before looking back at her friends. I say we take the biggest and make him sit out. It'll be 4 versus 3. What about magic? Asked Sweetie Belle. I'm not that good, but Nyx knows some magic. She turned Fluttershy into a tree. You heard about that? Nyx asked, a bit embarrassed. Hard not to, considering every pony here saw the tree, Scootaloo pointed out. Still, I think Sweetie Belle is right. I don't know, Apple Bloom said hesitantly. Nyx, do you think you have enough magic? I don't know, maybe, I guess. Come on, Apple Bloom, just think about it, Scootaloo said as she nudged her friend. The four of us beating the four of them without any help. It would be so awesome. Apple Bloom smiled a little. Well, I guess it would be cool, and it's not like we've got anything to lose. We already beat Diamond Tiara, and seeing her fall in the mud was all I really wanted to get out of this here tug of war tournament. Alright, it's decided. Nyx will be our anchor and use her magic, Scootaloo concluded. The Crusaders ended their huddle and told Rainbow Dash their choice. Rainbow echoed their choice to the crowd, and most of the ponies cheered at the team's courage, though Twilight looked with a forced, anxious smile. The four nearly full-grown stallions on the other team took the rope in their mouths, smiling like they had already won. Sweetie Belle, Apple Bloom, and Scootaloo took the rope up as well, biting down hard as they prepared for what was going to be a very hard match to win. Nyx stood at the end, gripping the very end of the rope with her teeth. Her horn was also glowing as she used her magic to try and keep the team's hooves from sliding. All right, is every pony ready? Dash asked, looking at the two teams. They all gave a nod, and with a smile, Dash lifted a hoof high into the air. Ready, set, go. Splash. Sweetie Belle was down within moments of the match starting. All it had taken was a sound tug from the big stallions on the other team to send her falling into the mud pit. The rest of the Crusaders tried their best to pull back, but from the first moment, the match had become one-sided. Even with Nyx doing her best to use her magic, the boulders were able to drag them forward with little difficulty. Splash. Scootaloo crashed face first into the mud pit right beside Sweetie Belle, who had just barely managed to get out of the way. Splash. The older colts were grinning, finding some perverse joy in sending four little fillies crashing into the mud. With that third splash, Apple Bloom had joined Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, leaving Nyx alone on the rope. Her hooves were sliding across the ground, the other team dragging her closer and closer to the mud. Nyx, for a moment, considered just letting go and giving up. After all, what hope did she have to beat the four big colts? Come on, Nyx. Apple Bloom called out as she clambered out of the mud. Use more magic. Yeah, don't let them beat you. Scootaloo shouted. She also stomped her hoof, but soon regretted the action as it splashed more mud onto her face. Nyx began to panic. With her friends cheering, letting go of the rope wasn't an option. Still, how in Equestria was she supposed to beat four colts by herself? They were bigger, stronger, the only advantage she had was her magic, and it hadn't been enough to keep Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Apple Bloom out of the mud. She just didn't know what to do. Come on, dig your hooves in and pull. Apple Bloom shouted as Nyx was pulled inch by inch closer to the mud pit. Nyx whined and tried to do that, but her hooves were being pulled across the ground. She couldn't pull if she couldn't get a grip on the ground, and she didn't have the strength to pull the older colts even if she managed to get traction. That was what she needed, traction and strength. Maybe she could do that with her magic. One of the spells would need to be something she could cast and forget, but maybe she could pull that off. The mud pit was drawing closer. The older colts on the other team were all wearing smiles, playing with Nyx as they inched her closer and closer to the pit. Most of the crowd had given up cheering and was now just waiting for the inevitable. The only ones still cheering were supporters of the boulders. The only cheers that still rang out for Nyx came from Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Apple Bloom. Nyx tightened her grip on the rope, despite the tightness already present in her jaw. Traction and strength, that's what she needed. First, traction, to stop the other team from pulling her closer to the pit. Shutting her eyes, Nyx cast her first spell with a flash from her horn, and a moment later her hooves became rooted to the ground. This stopped the boulders from pulling her closer to the mud pit, but stopping them alone wouldn't win the match. With the first spell cast, Nyx began to pour the mystical energy into herself, bending the magic from her horn down into her legs and jaw. Nyx could feel it working almost immediately. She could feel herself getting just a little stronger as her body became fueled by the magic. Her jaw no longer hurt, and, with her grip on the rope secured, she lifted one of her hooves and revealed the effect of her first spell. She had transfigured some of the dirt on the ground into horseshoes with long cleats, which kept her from sliding. With magic coursing through her body and her eyes shut tight in concentration, Nyx took a step back and began to pull. The rope gave a little, just enough to let Nyx know that what she was doing was working and all she needed was more magic. Calling on her horn, Nyx poured as much magic as she could into her little body, and she felt it giving her strength. It also made her mane and tail tingle, as if they had fallen asleep, but she couldn't focus on that. She had to focus on her legs, taking one step after another. She pulled with her neck, then used the slack to take a step. Slack, step, slack, step. She kept up that pattern, repeating it over and over until her ears were greeted with four sounds. Splash, 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 splash. The moment Nyx heard the fourth splash, she dropped the rope, released the magic, and collapsed on the ground as she panted heavily. The magic she had poured into her body began to evaporate, and she began to feel sore all over, her jaw especially tender. Still, despite her exhaustion, Nyx smiled. She had beat the big ponies all by herself, and maybe now every pony wouldn't just think of her as the coward, the crybaby, or the teacher's pet. Maybe they would start cheering her and wouldn't think she was a loser anymore. She'd get a first-place ribbon, just like her friends, and... It was then Nyx noticed the crowd's silence. Crawling back to her hooves and looking around, Nyx was surprised to see that every pony was staring at her, many with their jaws hanging open. Nyx even caught sight of Twilight, and she looked like she was about to faint. Her eyes kept darting around the crowd, as if she was expecting something bad to happen. The unpleasant silence sank into Nyx, and she wondered if she had done something wrong. She shrank back, trying to make herself as small as possible. Every pony was staring at her, just staring, and she didn't like it. She looked around desperately, hoping to find some pony, any pony, who was actually happy she had won the match. Thankfully, Nyx found 3 such ponies, her friends. While it had taken them a moment to process what she had done, the realization soon hit the other cutie mark crusaders. The 3 other fillies raced towards their friend with wide, excited grins on their faces. Scootaloo, the first to reach Nyx, cheered at the top of her lungs. That was awesome. You did it. You did it. Sweetie Belle added as she bounced excitedly up and down. The cheers and admiration from the crusaders snapped the crowd out of their stupor. Some of them applauded and offered sincere cheers while others just stomped their hooves on the ground to be polite. The rest didn't applaud at all and instead whispered to each other quietly. Amongst those who applauded was one pony with brown-gray eyes and a blue, slicked-back mane. He applauded with a gentle smile on his lips while his eyes remained focused on Nyx. Tilda tilde tilde. Boy, that was crazy, Rainbow Dash stated as she fluttered through the air with a box in her hooves. I mean, can you believe little Nyx beating that whole team of older colts? I didn't think the crybaby had it in her. What are the chances? It really was amazing, Fluttershy replied as she walked along the ground with a box on her back. The pair was taking some of the leftover prizes and other things into the schoolhouse as part of the effort to clean up the Learn and Play Day. I wonder if every pony in Twilight's family is that good at magic. I wouldn't be surprised, Rainbow Dash replied as she put a hoof on the door. I mean, Shining Armor can cast that huge shield spell, and Twilight is like a one-unicorn army with all the magic she can do. She entered the darkened schoolhouse, but before she could get 2 feet into the door, she ran into something. Caught off guard by the sudden collision, Rainbow quickly flew backwards and tried to register what she had run into. Pie, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash mumbled. She and Fluttershy set the boxes they were carrying down and moved around in front of Pinkie Pie. Pinkie was standing still as a statue on her hind legs in a karate pose, and her eyes were focused on a point on the far side of the room. Is she even breathing? Dash asked, noticing how very still Pinkie Pie was standing. Fluttershy looked Pinkie Pie over, only for a panicked frown to form on her face. Oh no, she's been stared. Rainbow Dash couldn't help but cock an eyebrow as she waved a hoof in front of Pinkie Pie's eyes. What does that mean? Fluttershy turned her gaze on Dash, and motioned towards her own eyes. You know, the stare. Ooh, yeah, Rainbow Dash replied, it's what you do when you want to make some animal do something, right? Well, not exactly, but yeah, sort of, Fluttershy replied as she gingerly poked Pinkie Pie's hoof. Anyway, sometimes, when I use the stare I can make the pony or animal I'm staring at just freeze up. Wait, so you did this to Pinkie Pie? Oh no, it wasn't me, Fluttershy quickly clarified. I haven't done this to any pony in years. It was only when I first found out I had the stare that I accidentally did this once in a while, but I'd never do it on purpose to another pony. No, some other pony did this. Rainbow Dash turned her attention back to Pinkie Pie. Okay, but how do we fix it? Well, I usually just throw a bit of water on them, but anything that gives the pony a little shock is enough to snap them out of it. Oh, I got an idea, Rainbow Dash said, hovering up near Pinkie Pie's ear and beginning to whisper. Hey Pinkie Pie, Twilight just got a letter from Princess Celestia. She wants you to plan the next Grand Galloping Gala. Pinkie Pie's eyes, which had been narrow and transfixed on a spot on the far side of the room, grew wide, and, in a flash, Pinkie was bouncing off the walls and ceiling, her giggles filling the air. Oh, that is so super duper amazing. I am going to make it the best party ever. I'll make it the most amazing, incredible, tremendous, wonderfully, terrifically, humongous fun party in all of Equestria. Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala will be the greatest party. Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala will be the greatest party. Hip hip, hooray, it will be the best, all thanks to me, to Pinkie. Yeah, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow said, wearing an apologetic grin. About that, I was lying. Pinkie Pie froze up mid-jump, defying gravity for a moment before dropping down to the ground. She then trotted over to Dash with a cold glare in her eyes. That was not an okay prank, Rainbow Dash. Rainbow rubbed the back of her neck while she glanced away, unable to meet Pinkie Pie's disappointed stare. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but it wasn't meant to be a prank. I needed to say something to snap you out of being stared. Pinkie's expression shifted from irritation to confusion. Wait, I was stared. Rainbow looked back at Pinkie Pie, since it was now her turn to be confused. You actually know what that is? Oh, yes, Fluttershy admitted sheepishly. When I first met Pinkie Pie she kind of, scared me and, I didn't mean to but, I used the stare on her, and she got stared. It was the last time she ever did it, Pinkie Pie pointed out, unless you count today. But Pinkie, I wasn't the one who used the stare on you, Fluttershy corrected. You weren't. But then who, Pinkie Pie began, only for her eyes to narrow. She turned to look at the far end of the room, intending to glare at a pony that was no longer there. It was him. Him who, Pinkie? Dash asked. The spy, she seethed as she trotted across the room and pointed to a spot on the floor. I followed him in here, and he was standing right here. Right here. I had him cornered, but then he opened his eyes, and they had changed color. The next thing I remember is you telling me Princess Celestia wants me to plan the next Grand Galloping Gala, which, by the way, is still a mean prank, Rainbow Dash. Look, Pinkie, I said I was sorry. Dash countered as she flew over to her friend. But, I guess you weren't kidding about the spy. I mean, it's not like an imaginary pony could have stared you. But why would any pony spy on us? Fluttershy asked as she made her way across the room, walking between the desks. I don't know, but I'm going to find out, Pinkie Pie assured firmly, only for her normal, happy, bubbly attitude to return a moment later as she bounced towards the schoolhouse door. Well, after all the fun afternoon games, I would hate to miss the six-legged race and watching the tug of war. Oh, and I just have to play pin the tail on the pony. Pinkie Pie, you did miss all that. Pinkie Pie froze up halfway through the schoolhouse door before she spun around on her hooves to look at the two Pegasi. What? Quote. Yeah, you've been in here all afternoon, Rainbow Dash informed her friend. We're actually cleaning up right now. Oh, now I am going to find that spy. Pinkie Pie declared, her eyes dark with resolve. Not just because he was being a spy-spired and McSpee. No, now it's personal. No pony makes Pinkie Pie mispin the tail on the pony. Equals Questions, comments, concerns. pen.stroke.pony@gmail.com. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Copyright Hasbro. I do not own the intellectual properties this fan fiction is based on. Click here for the Past Sins version archive. Revealing Truths. Past Sins. By Pen Stroke. Assisted by Batty Gloom. Chapter 9. Revealing Truths. Twilight walked back to the Golden Oaks Library with Nyx as the sun began to set beneath the western horizon. Rainbow Dash and a few others were still back at the school, cleaning up the learn and play day. Normally, she'd be right there beside them. But after everything that had happened and all the time she had spent helping organize the event, Twilight was thankful she had opted out. The last thing she wanted to do at the moment was to linger around the school with Nyx. Nyx, however, was oblivious to Twilight's concerns and as happy as she could be. She bounced alongside Twilight, proudly wearing her first-place ribbon from the tug-of-war competition and her Cutie Mark Crusader cape. She used a kazoo, her chosen prize, to play a triumphant fanfare that only she knew the notes to. It was a sight that let Twilight relax a little. She was happy that Nyx had enjoyed herself. The silence from the crowd after the last round had been deafening. Twilight could only imagine how bad Nyx would have felt if no pony had cheered for her. Thankfully Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo broke the silence, letting Nyx laugh and enjoy her victory. It was, however, only a small drop of happiness in a sea of fear and anxiety. While Nyx was unaware of what had happened, Twilight had been in the crowd, watching when she used her magic to win that last round of tug of war. It had started off simply enough, but then Nyx started using more and more magic. It was more magic than Twilight had ever seen from her, and there didn't appear to be an end in sight. And, as Nyx filled herself with it, things about her began to change. Nyx's mane started shimmering at first, something that could have easily been waved off as a trick of the light. Yet, Nyx's mane and her tail continued to change, revealing the energy flowing through her body. They grew lighter and began to float and wave in the air as though Nyx was deep underwater. The shimmering of her hair also condensed, changing from what could be mistaken as glitter to defined, constant dots. It was one of the worst things Twilight could imagine happening. Nyx's mane and tail had started to change into the night blue mane and tail that Nightmare Moon was known for, with every pony at Learn and Play Day watching. The timely defeat of the other team kept Nyx's mane and tail from changing completely, but several unwanted thoughts still lingered in Twilight's mind. For the first time since the evening Nyx had called her Mom, Twilight doubted herself. Could Nyx really be Nightmare Moon? She had always argued that Nyx just looked like the infamous Mare in the Moon, but, with those memories returning and her level of magic, was it possible she really was Nightmare Moon? Part of Twilight's mind snapped at these thoughts, cracking a mental whip like an animal tamer driving a beast back into its cage. No, Nyx was not Nightmare Moon. The filly was too sweet, too well-behaved, too sensitive to ever be Nightmare Moon. She was happy. She played and laughed with her friends. Yes, Nightmare Moon laughed at times, but her laughter was maddening and born of scorn and thoughts of domination, not true happiness. Yet, Twilight did know one thing: Nyx was showing signs of being an immortal alicorn. The filly that she was taking care of, that she was raising, there was a chance she would be alive for thousands of years with the power to do things that would boggle the minds of other ponies. Was she really up to that kind of responsibility, to shape the life of a filly that could live for the rest of time? Nyx noticed how silent Twilight had been and stopped her happy kazoo playing before looking up with a hint of concern. Twilight, she asked, are you okay? Huh, what? Twilight turned her head down to face Nyx and put on a forced smile. Oh, yes, I'm fine. Just tired, that's all. We've had a busy day. Now, why don't you run in and show Spike your ribbon? I'm just going to stay outside for a little while longer. Nyx nodded, returned the kazoo to her mouth, and blew on it loudly as she ran inside. Twilight smiled at this, but it was a smile destined to wither and die. Tilda tilde tilde. Now, let's see. I went by the train station to pick up my fabric order. I've been to the grocery store and the jeweler's. The only place left is the... Ow. Rarity stopped in her tracks. She had been running errands in Ponyville, but they were now a trivial concern. Twilight had been uncommonly reclusive for a few days, ever since the Learn and Play Day. Now, that alone wasn't too abnormal, but the aggravated shout Rarity had just heard made her worry. Abandoning her planned route, she strode right up to the library's front door and knocked several times. Twilight, however, didn't answer, and neither did Spike. Fearing the worst, Rarity opened the door herself and poked her head inside. Twilight, darling, are you? The words died in Rarity's mouth as she stepped into the library. Crumpled up pieces of paper littered the floor, and Twilight was standing at her writing desk. Her mane and tail were ragged with stress, and another aggravated groan escaped her lips before she crumpled up the page she was working on. She tossed it over her shoulder, inadvertently hitting Rarity on the nose. Ow. Twilight quickly turned, and, for a moment, panicked like she had just been caught breaking the law. Her expression, however, quickly softened, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, Rarity, I thought you were Nyx. And just what are you doing that you don't want Nyx to know about? Twilight glanced around, and, with a surge of magic, quickly gathered up all the crumpled pieces of paper that were scattered across the floor. She stuffed them all under her desk, and turned to Rarity as if the papers didn't exist. So, how are you? Do you need help with anything? Can I help you find a book? Rarity eyed Twilight a moment, glanced down at the pile of crumpled paper, and looked back to Twilight. Well, perhaps I do need something to read, she said calmly. Wonderful. What kind of book would you like? Twilight asked before she began to walk towards the shelves. An adventure story. A mystery. Maybe I can interest you in. Don't worry, Twilight, I've found just what I wanted to read. Twilight turned, expecting to see Rarity holding a book. Instead, while Twilight's back was turned, Rarity had taken one of the crumpled pieces of paper and spread it out flat. She was now reading it, much to Twilight's horror. Rarity, no, you can't, Twilight tried to protest. She galloped towards Rarity with the full intent of snatching the page out of her magic. Rarity, however, turned to one side, letting Twilight leap past her and crash to the floor as she continued to read. Twilight, this is a letter to Princess Celestia, about Nyx. Twilight groaned and didn't even bother trying to pick herself up off the floor. She just turned over and lay on her back as she covered her face. I know. Frowning a little, Rarity folded up the letter and tucked it in her bags before looking back to Twilight. I would also venture to guess, from your mane and eyes, you haven't had a decent night's sleep in days. I know, Twilight groaned again. And just how long have you been like this? 3 days, Twilight admitted, her hooves still covering her eyes. Rarity nodded her head and picked Twilight up in her magic. Twilight, I believe you and I have something to discuss, something both of us are going to need a cup of tea for. Tilda. Despite the odd looks she received from passers-by on the street, Rarity carried Twilight all the way back to Carousel Boutique. She then sat Twilight at her kitchen table and prepared an early afternoon tea. The blend was Twilight's favorite. Its aroma alone seemed to bring a little energy back to her. Rarity set a full cup down on the table before sitting down with her own. She took a single sip and waited for Twilight to do the same before breaking the near silence that had befallen her kitchen. Feeling better? A little, yes, Twilight replied weakly. Good. Any improvement is a step in the right direction. Still, I believe we have something to talk about, and I believe this is part of it. At that, Rarity withdrew the half-written letter to Celestia she had folded and placed in her bag back at the library. I don't know what to do, Rarity, Twilight finally admitted, holding her teacup between her hooves and looking at her reflection in the tinted liquid. You don't know what to do about what? Twilight sighed and looked up at Rarity with her bag-lined eyes. Nyx. What's the matter? Rarity asked. Has Nyx gotten in trouble, or has she gone missing again? No, she's fine and at school. I know, Twilight couldn't bring herself to finish her sentence. She groaned and dropped her head to the desk with a loud thump. What do you know? Rarity asked. Twilight, however, didn't answer, only fueling Rarity's concerns. Fearing the worst, she leaned forward and placed a hoof on Twilight's shoulder. Twilight, what do you know? Twilight didn't lift her head from the table. She only rolled her head enough to look at Rarity from the corner of the eye before she said, Rarity, I finally know for sure that Nyx is Nightmare Moon. Rarity lifted her hoof from Twilight's shoulder, unable to believe the words she had just heard leave Twilight's mouth. You know. How do you know? Didn't you see what happened at the tug-of-war finals? I did, but... Twilight sat up, her eyebrows furrowed. Then you saw what happened to Nyx's mane. You saw how she was able to beat those colts by herself. Twilight lowered her head, once more staring at her partially emptied cup of tea. It's just too much to deny anymore. She doesn't just look like Nightmare Moon. She was made by a spell meant to resurrect Nightmare Moon. She has some of Nightmare Moon's memories, now I'm sure she has Nightmare Moon's power. Body, memories, and magic, I just can't deny it anymore. And this letter, along with all the others? Rarity asked before she gently nudged the uncrumpled letter towards Twilight. I promised you, the day you helped me with NY. Twilight stopped, and shook her head before continuing. The day you helped me with Nightmare Moon's disguise, you made me make a promise. You made me swear that if I figured out who she really was, then I would send a letter to Princess Celestia. I promised I'd tell the princess everything, and I've been trying to. I've been trying for days, but I just can't find the words. Twilight looked up at Rarity, desperation in her eyes. Rarity, what if she takes her away? What if she sends her to the moon? I'd never see her again. She'd be all alone, and she hates that. And what would I tell her friends when they ask where she's gone? They'd want to see her, want to write her letters, but how would I send letters to the moon? Twilight's frown deepened. She rested her forelegs on the table and held her head in her hooves. But what will happen when she grows up and remembers more about her past? She could overthrow Princess Celestia again, bring back the eternal night. This might be our only chance to stop her, but. Unable to find anything more to say, Twilight turned to look at Rarity. What do I do? That question ushered in a silence between the two mares. Twilight continued to look to Rarity, hoping for some advice, but Rarity looked just as unsure. She wore a contemplative expression and sipped at her tea not just once but twice before she set down the cup and returned her attention to Twilight. First, you're right. It would be foolish of us to deny the facts in front of us. Nyx and Nightmare Moon are the same pony. Rarity's voice grew stronger and gained a commanding tone. That, however, is who she was, Twilight, not who she is. But Rarity, Twilight began, only for Rarity to lift a hoof. Twilight, do you know what happened last week? The Cutie Mark Crusaders, Nyx included, came stumbling into my shop covered in honey, leaving sticky hoof prints all across my front room. I was, of course, furious, but before I scolded them for making a mess of my boutique, do you know what they were doing? No, Twilight answered flatly. A smile spread onto Rarity's lips. They were laughing. They were laughing, together, at their latest escapade, and Nyx was laughing just as loudly as the others. Twilight, I can understand your fears. I shared those fears when you first brought Nyx into my shop. But, Rarity continued, ensuring that Twilight did not interrupt, there is a difference between was and is Twilight, and what matters is who Nyx is. Nyx is a curious little filly with good friends, 3 of whom ensure she gets into more than an appropriate amount of trouble for a pony her age. But what if she grows up evil? What if she? Twilight, being worried is perfectly normal, Rarity assured her. Heaven knows I worry about Sweetie Belle every time she goes off with her friends to do their crusading. For the longest time my parents trusted me to foal sit her, and she's gotten into more trouble than I ever did growing up. I'm always afraid that some pony will come running into my shop to tell me Sweetie Belle had gotten hurt or worse. Rarity paused to take a sip from her tea before continuing. Despite this, I can't always be there to keep Sweetie Belle safe, and I can't keep her from enjoying her childhood. She should be out there with her friends, having fun and getting into trouble, not too much trouble, mind you, but some. Twilight frowned, unconvinced. But Sweetie Belle is just a normal little unicorn, Rarity. Nyx is. Nyx is just as normal, Rarity interrupted firmly. Yes, she's an alicorn, and, yes, she may very well be Nightmare Moon reincarnated. I'm not ignoring those facts, Twilight, nor am I ignoring the fact that Nyx could become the same Nightmare Moon that threatened Equestria. There is something, however, you are failing to take into account. What's that? You, Rarity said as she pointed her hoof at Twilight. Nyx could become the same Nightmare Moon she was, but she also has a chance to be something else, and, so far, you've been helping her do that. Rarity's words rang through Twilight's head and left her in a mild stupor. She leaned back in her chair, her body so limp she could have fallen to the floor if the chair was nudged. But what hope do I have of changing a mare like Nightmare Moon? Well, if you were to ask my opinion, I'd say there isn't any pony better. Twilight, not only have you changed since you came to Ponyville, but you've helped a lot of us change for the better. You helped Applejack learn to ask for help when she's overwhelmed. You helped Pinkie Pie learn not to jump to conclusions. You helped Princess Luna have fun and make friends on Nightmare Night. And, Twilight, even if you hadn't done all that, you'd still be the pony with the best chance of helping Nyx be something else. Rarity smiled and set her hoof on Twilight's. Because you're the pony Nyx cares the most about in the world, and you care about her just as much. Twilight looked at Rarity as those words worked their way through her mind. At first, her expression was of disbelief and uncertainty. But soon, like dirt was being rinsed off her face, Twilight's worried expression fell away. It was replaced by a small smile as her doubt was replaced by hope that Nightmare Moon could be a different mare. Thank you, Rarity, Twilight finally said before she leaned in and gave her friend a grateful hug. I'm happy to help, Twilight, Rarity said, returning the hug. When Twilight pulled away, Rarity flashed a smile and lifted her cup of tea. We mares have to stick together, after all. Twilight chuckled and picked up her cup. I guess we do. She then sighed, and looked at the uncrumpled, half-written letter on the table. Now I just have to figure out what I'm going to tell Princess Celestia, if I tell her anything at all. If I may say so, Twilight, you may still want to write to her about this. It's only going to get worse the longer you put it off. I know, I just want to wait a little longer. I'll try writing the letter again next week, when I've had a chance to catch up on my sleep. Speaking of sleep, I do hope you're going to let Nyx go to the Cutie Mark Crusader sleepover Apple Bloom is having at Sweet Apple Acres. I can only imagine that she's just as excited about it as Sweetie Belle is. Twilight laughed a little as she remembered how Nyx was bouncing happily when she was told what a sleepover was. Probably more excited, considering it's her first, and I think I'll let her go. Rarity paused to take a sip of her tea. That's good. Not only will it make Nyx happy, but it may help dispel some of the rumors that are undoubtedly floating around. If ponies see you and Nyx walking to Sweet Apple Acres, it may help them believe that what happened at Learn and Play Day wasn't out of the ordinary. After all, if something was wrong, most ponies would expect you to hide Nyx away. Which is something I seriously considered, Twilight admitted before taking a sip of tea, but, if our friends are any indication, they all just think Nyx is really good at magic, like me. So, for the moment, I can just say that strong magic runs in our family. After all, I did turn my parents into potted plants when I was taking my entrance exam for Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns. You mean the day you got your cutie mark? Yes, I heard it was quite the impressive display, at least from what Sweetie Belle told me of the story. I would like to hear about it, if you don't mind sharing. I'll love to tell you. It all started when. Just a moment, Rarity interrupted as she lifted a hoof. Why don't you tell me once we're at the spa? Twilight tilted her head. Why would I tell you once we're at the spa? Rarity looked at Twilight as if the reason was obvious. Twilight, dear, just look at yourself. Split ends everywhere, and the bags under your eyes. If Nyx were to see you like this, she'd never be able to enjoy herself at the sleepover. She might even stay at the library out of worry. No, if you're going to send Nyx off to her first sleepover, then you and I must take a trip to the spa. I'm not taking no for an answer. Twilight laughed a little, and stood up from the kitchen table. Actually, the spa sounds really good right now. Tilda tilda tilda. Well, I don't think our cutie marks have anything to do with bein' rodeo ponies, Apple Bloom said dejectedly. She pushed open the door to her bedroom and walked inside with Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Nyx following close behind. Their sleeping bags were rolled out on the floor, surrounding Apple Bloom's four-post, apple-themed bed. It was kind of fun seeing Big Macintosh tied up like that, Scootaloo said with a chuckle. He didn't even know what hit him. Tell that to my sister, Apple Bloom replied before she jumped onto her bed, 'cause if she had found it funny, we wouldn't have been sent to bed already. Sweetie Belle lay down on her sleeping bag. Yeah, but that isn't so bad. I'm pretty tired. Don't tell me you want to go to sleep already. Scootaloo complained. Sure, we had to go to bed, but there's still a lot of fun things we could do. Like what? Scootaloo grabbed a lantern off Apple Bloom's bedside table, turned it down so it was barely flickering, and then held it beneath her chin. The weak flame cast hard, spooky shadows across Scootaloo's face. We could tell ghost stories. No offense, Scootaloo, but your ghost stories aren't that scary, Apple Bloom said. Even Nyx isn't afraid of them. Hey, Nyx whined. Scootaloo lowered the lantern from her face before turning it back up so it lit up most of the room. Okay, then what do you think we should do? We could play a board game, Sweetie Belle suggested. Apple Bloom and Nyx perked up at the idea of a board game, but Scootaloo shook her head. No, that's too boring. Well shoot, Apple Bloom grumbled, what are we going to do then? Well, Twilight gave me a book she said really helped with her first slumber party, Nyx said. She levitated a book from her saddlebags, which were stacked with the rest by the bedroom door. Are slumber parties the same as sleepovers? Sweetie Belle asked as Nyx cracked open the book. Well, you spend the night with friends, so I guess they're the same, Scootaloo said before scrunching up her nose. But I don't want to do any sort of makeover stuff. Nyx flipped through a few pages of the book in her search for ideas. Me neither. We could have a pillow fight. We've only got 4 pillows, and my bedroom is too small, Apple Bloom said, shooting down the idea. We could make s'mores. We don't have marshmallows, or chocolate, or graham crackers, or even a fire to roast the marshmallows on, Sweetie Belle pointed out. Well, ghost stories are in here too, Nyx said with a slight quiver. She shook her head before the thoughts of scary stories could sink in and continued reading. But I think we've already decided not to do that. Bet you're glad about that, huh? Scootaloo teased. Nyx glared at Scootaloo for a moment before turning back to the book. Here's another game, Truth or Dare. That sounds kind of fun, Sweetie Belle offered with a smile. How do you play? Apple Bloom asked. Nyx held a hoof on the page in the book, reading the instructions out loud. Some pony starts by asking if another pony wants to tell the truth or take a dare. If the pony chooses truth, they have to answer one question truthfully. If they take the dare, they have to do whatever dare the first pony gives them. Once the question is answered or the dare is completed, the next pony in the circle takes their turn. Play continues for as long as desired. Scootaloo turned over on her sleeping bag, looking at the rest of her friends from her now upside-down perspective. That sounds kind of boring. I mean, the truth part sounds alright, but what could we dare each other to do? Oh, I know. Apple Bloom perked up. Let's make it truth or challenge. What's the difference? Asked Scootaloo. Challenges are a lot harder than dares because you actually have to do something, well, challenging. Something that might be hard to do. If you don't want to answer a question, then you'll have to complete a challenge. If you can't, then you'll have to answer the question. That sounds way better, Sweetie Belle agreed. Let's do it. Nyx looked up anxiously, a little worried about the idea. Still, her 3 friends were very eager to get the game started, so she just put the sleepover guidebook back into her bags and forced some enthusiasm. Okay, so who wants to go first? Scootaloo shot upright, enthusiastically thrusting a hoof into the air. Oh, me. Apple Bloom, truth or challenge? Apple Bloom paused to think. I'll go with the challenge. I challenge you to stand on your head for 10 seconds. Ha, is that all? Apple Bloom replied confidently. Within moments, she was balancing on her head, back legs waving around as her friends counted down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Apple Bloom got back to her hooves, smiling triumphantly before wavering. She shook her head to try and clear it. Whoa, that makes my head all swimmy. Really? Let me try, Sweetie Belle said before flipping onto her head. Soon, the other 3 cutie mark crusaders were on their heads, laughing and giggling as the blood rushed to their brains. Tilda tilde tilde. Okay, Nyx, truth or challenge? Apple Bloom asked about an hour later. The game had proven to be an ideal way to end the sleepover. The 4 friends had done a lot of strange and silly challenges, from seeing how long they could hold their breath to having hoof wrestling contests. It was all in good fun, and Nyx was ready for more. She bit her lower lip and focused on Apple Bloom as she tried to decide what she would do. Truth, Nyx finally answered. Apple Bloom leaned in, lowering her voice. Tell us something you've never told any other pony. Nyx blinked in confusion and tilted her head to one side. Like what? Apple Bloom shrugged. Anything. Yeah, just make it something cool, Scootaloo added. Well, I can't really think of anything to tell you, but Nyx fell silent and glanced back at her vest. There is something I can show you. Really? What is it? Sweetie Belle asked. I think it's better if I just show you, but you have to promise not to tell any other pony. Twilight and Rarity know, but they told me I couldn't show any pony what I'm about to show you. Oh boy, this has to be good if Twilight told you to keep it a secret, Scootaloo grinned. Yeah, we promise not to tell any pony. Nyx turned to look at Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle, ensuring that the 2 other fillies also promised to keep her secret. Despite their nods, Nyx had one more condition. And you have to promise me you won't hate me, and we'll still be friends after I show you. Well, that's a silly thing to promise, Apple Bloom said as Sweetie Belle nodded her head in agreement. We're the Cutie Mark Crusaders. We're going to be best friends for life. No matter what, Scootaloo stated firmly with a strong, confident smile. Nyx smiled nervously, looking at her 3 friends. Her decision made, she got up from her sleeping bag and walked across the room into Apple Bloom's closet. She slipped inside and shut the door behind her. For a moment, all Apple Bloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle could hear was the sound of rustling. They craned their necks, watching and waiting anxiously until the door opened. Nyx nervously walked out, carrying her vest in her teeth. Once she was a few steps out of the closet, she spread her wings, stretching them for a few moments before letting them fold to her sides. Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Apple Bloom all stared with eyes wide and jaws hanging open. Nyx set down her vest and waited for her friends to say something. They, however, remained unnervingly silent. She frowned and looked away from her friends anxiously. Tears started to pull at her eyes, and she began to retreat back into the closet. She was sure she had just made a horrible mistake. Yet, before Nyx could flee or hide, her 3 friends surrounded her. Why didn't you tell us sooner you had wings? Apple Bloom asked. Well, Rarity told me that if ponies knew I had both a horn and wings, they would get jealous of me. I didn't ask for them, I just have them, and. Sweetie Belle nodded. Oh, yeah, you could make Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon jealous. But aren't you jealous? Rarity said every pony would be, and I don't want to make you 3 jealous. Nah, why would we be jealous? Apple Bloom asked. It's just part of who you are. It'd be as silly as me being jealous of how well Sweetie Belle sings. Or me being jealous of how well Scootaloo rides her scooter, Sweetie Belle chimed in. Scootaloo motioned to herself with a hoof. Or me being jealous of how good Apple Bloom is at fixing up things like our clubhouse. Yeah, it's like my big sister Applejack says, there ain't no point in being jealous because it doesn't change how things are. Why do you have wings and a horn? Sweetie Belle asked, unable to contain her curiosity. The only ponies I know that have both are Princess Celestia and Princess Luna. Don't forget about Princess Cadence, Scootaloo added. Well, isn't it obvious? Apple Bloom asked, looking at her friends who only answered her with silent, blank stares. Well, okay, maybe not so obvious. Just spit it out, Apple Bloom, said Scootaloo. I bet that one of Nyx's parents is a unicorn and the other is a Pegasus. Sweetie Belle cocked an eyebrow. Does it really work like that? I mean, isn't there some pony else in our class that has a unicorn for a mom and a Pegasus for a dad? Maybe it doesn't happen all the time, Scootaloo guessed. I mean, isn't there also a pony in our class who has a pair of unicorns as parents but doesn't have a horn of her own? Apple Bloom nodded as she turned to jump back up onto her bed. Yeah, there is, and I think Scootaloo is right. It must only happen some of the time. Anyway, Nyx, it's your turn. Nix, Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo returned to their sleeping bags. She couldn't deny that it felt nice not having to wear her vest. Her wings always felt kind of scrunched up beneath the fabric. She allowed her wings to flutter a little as she lay down on her sleeping bag. She then turned her attention back to the game. Okay, Sweetie Belle, truth or challenge? Truth, Sweetie Belle answered without a moment's hesitation. What's the funniest story you have of your big sister Rarity? Sweetie Belle snorted and started giggling. Oh, you're going to like this. It didn't take long for Sweetie Belle to tell the story, and, by the end, all four fillies were giggling loudly until a pounding came at the bedroom door. Apple Bloom, you and our friends get to sleep right this minute or I'm going come in there and hogtie all of you in your sleepin' bags. Applejack threatened, clearly irritated by the late night noise. I've got apple buckin' to do in the mornin', and I won't have you four keepin' me up all night. The four fillies chimed back up we're sorry, and, with their game over, decided to call it a night. Apple Bloom blew out the lantern in her room, and the four friends lay down to go to sleep. Still, before any pony could fall asleep, Nix broke the silence. Girls, thank you for still being my friends, even after I showed you my wings. Ah, of course we're still your friends. Sweetie Belle replied from her own sleeping bag. We're the Cutie Mark Crusaders, that's like being friends for life with a cool theme song. Sweetie Belle gently cleared her throat and began to sing. We are the Cutie Mark Crusaders on a quest to find out who we are. And we will never stop the journey, not until we have our cutie marks. While Sweetie Belle had been the one to start singing, the other three soon joined in. It wasn't the intense, arguably painful, rock ballad that had been performed at the talent show. Instead, the three sang it softly, softly enough that even Scootaloo's voice was bearable. The four drifted off to sleep to the sound of their own theme song, none resting as well as Nix. She had shared a secret about herself with her friends, and they accepted her all the same. Tilda tilde tilde. Nexus stared at the moon with turquoise eyes through his study window, floating a glass of orange juice nearby. He swirled the contents gently while intently examining a scroll. It was one of the reports he had received from the spy, and, while some of the information was welcoming, other pieces were troubling. His plan had gone off without a hitch for the most part. Through his connections at Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns, he had sent out flyers to every school in Equestria pitching the idea of a learn and play day. He had then instructed Filthy Rich to approach Cheerilee and convince her of the idea's merit. In the end, Cheerilee held her own learn and play day, and, during the event, the spy had been able to accomplish his goal. He had observed and spoken with Nix while Twilight Sparkle was preoccupied elsewhere. He had been able to learn a great deal, despite being interrupted by one particular pink mare. He witnessed and reported the 2 feats of magic Nix had performed, turning a pony into a tree in her performance in the game of tug of war. It was a kind of magic that only a few ponies could control at such a young age. There was no denying that the magical potential was there, but potential was not enough. Nix did not act like Nightmare Moon. She did not speak condescendingly to the country bumpkins of Ponyville. The spy described her as a nervous and timid filly that only had a few friends her own age. He would have expected to hear she was a troublemaker. He would have been happy to hear that she was the most popular filly in school, swaying the minds of her classmates like any young queen should. Nix, however, was far from these standards. But the potential was there, and that would be enough to make her Nightmare Moon. Making a second attempt at the resurrection spell without the lingering shreds would be impossible. But Nix could be used as a seed. She could be used to draw in the traces of Nightmare Moon's magic which had been dispersed by Princess Celestia's interruption. That magic would bear with it the echoes of Nightmare Moon. The memories, the emotions, the essence of the Great Dark Empress would fill Nix, and she would become the Queen Equestria deserved. But completing the spell would be difficult. He would need time to prepare, resources, and, above all, power. The spell would need to be obscenely powerful. That was the only way to be sure the ritual would be completed before Celestia could interfere a second time. A powerful spell, however, could not be set up secretly. One precluded the other, and thus Spell Nexus found himself thinking in circles. There was a need to act quickly, before something happened, but he could not act overtly. The spell had to be powerful, but had to be done secretly. If he could not strike a perfect balance, he risked another failure or revealing his true intentions to Celestia. What he needed was, Sir. Nexus glanced over his shoulder and at his butler, who was standing the study's doorway. Yes, proper etiquette. Princess Celestia is at the front door and wishes to have a word with you. Shall I see her in? Yes, please, Nexus replied, closing his turquoise-colored eyes. When he reopened them, they had reverted to their original slate-gray color. He finished the rest of the orange juice in his glass and walked across the room. He sat in his favorite chair and picked up a book, all an effort to make Celestia believe that the only thing she had interrupted was a quiet evening reading. The timing was near perfect. Nexus had just settled into one of his chairs with a book when the doors opened and Princess Celestia strolled in. Her guards remained in the hallway and pulled the door shut once she was inside. "Thank you for allowing me into your lovely home at such a late hour, Nexus," Princess Celestia said as she strode across the room. "I do hope I wasn't interrupting anything." Nexus set his book down on a nearby end table. "A good book and nothing more. Still, I find it surprising you are out and about at such an hour. You are usually in bed by this time." The princess came to a stop beside Nexus. "If I may be honest with you, I have been having trouble sleeping." "Then please," Nexus began. He motioned to a large cushion that was kept in his study specifically as a seat for royal Alicorn guests. "Make yourself comfortable and tell me what troubles you." Princess Celestia took Nexus's offer, sitting down on the cushion as she began to speak. She told Spell Nexus about the spell in the forest, about the research his coworker Bastion was doing, and of many other things Celestia had learned about the Children of Nightmare. It was information Nexus knew already, but he feigned interest all the same. He listened and offered appropriate levels of shock and disbelief. "To think, there are ponies trying to resurrect Nightmare Moon. It is hard to believe some would be so foolish," Nexus mused when Princess Celestia finished. He poured a fresh glass of orange juice for himself and offered some to her. She replied with a smile and a shake of her head. "But you stopped them," Nexus pointed out. He lifted his glass in a casual toast. "And Equestria continues to thrive in your protective embrace. So why have you not been sleeping well?" Princess Celestia was silent for a moment before looking at Nexus with a grave expression. "I've come to believe that the spell, while interrupted, may not have been completely unsuccessful." "What makes you say that?" Nexus asked with a concerned frown. "Do you know my student, Twilight Sparkle?" A chuckle escaped Nexus's lips. "The most magically gifted unicorn I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Of course I know your student. I would bet that every pony at your school knows of her, both staff and students." "Why do you ask?" "At the spring festival in Ponyville, I discovered Twilight was taking care of a young filly by the name of Nyx, who she said was her half-cousin," Celestia explained. "A filly that, if my sources are to be believed, started living with her shortly after the incident in the forest. A filly who, in recent days, performed 2 very profound feats of magic at a school weekend event." Nexus took a sip from his glass, not finding the information at all troubling. "I can only imagine powerful magic runs in her family." "Yes, if Nyx was related to Twilight, such magical power would be expected," Princess Celestia said. "Yet, I have checked the family's records. There is no listing of Twilight having a half-cousin named Nyx. In fact, there is no listing of a Nyx being born in Equestria in the past several decades. It's as if she appeared out of thin air." Nexus, who had been taking another sip from his orange juice, froze up for a single moment. He eyed Celestia over the rim of his glass and resumed drinking before she could notice. "Appeared out of thin air," Nexus echoed after clearing his throat. "Your Highness, do you believe that Nyx didn't exist until a few months ago, that she literally appeared out of thin air?" "I don't think she just appeared, but I do believe Nyx's origins are far different from a common pony's. Based on the research done by Bastion Yorsets and his team, I've come to know for certain that the ritual I interrupted was designed to bring back Nightmare Moon. It was also within days of the spell's failure that Nyx appeared in Ponyville. There are no records of her existing before she was registered for school. No pony in Ponyville knows anything more about Nyx's history than what Twilight herself has told me. As I have said, it seems like she appeared out of thin air, as if by magic." Nexus nodded. "I see. You believe Nightmare Moon and Nyx are one and the same." Nexus took a deep breath. "I do believe I understand why you've been losing sleep." "No, Spell Nexus, you don't," Celestia replied. She stood up and walked across the room. "For it is not as simple as you make it sound." "What is there to make it complex?" he asked. He sipped at his orange juice, trying to quell a tremor of fear that had slipped into his voice. "The fact that Nyx doesn't act anything like the mare I once knew," Princess Celestia replied as she reached the study's window. She looked at the moon while memories of the past overwhelmed her. Nightmare Moon, the real Nightmare Moon, was a vindictive, deceptive, hateful pony. She desired to plunge Equestria into eternal night, not just so ponies would appreciate the beauty of the stars and moon, but also so they would be deprived of the sun they loved so dearly. She was a threat to all Equestria, and I watched it happen. I watched as Luna, my dear sister, became that monstrous mare bent on vengeance. It was my duty as a big sister to protect her, and I failed. I failed so horribly that I had to banish her to the moon and wait 1,000 years for 6 ponies to do what I could not. And now, Celestia continued, lowering her head. Her regal composure was failing, and a tired expression took its place on her face. The past few nights, my dreams have been haunted. I see Nyx growing to become the monster I once knew. She laughs and plunges Equestria into eternal night. She takes away my sister and Twilight Sparkle. I scream and reach out to help them, only to find myself sitting up in my bed in an icy sweat. I fear this filly, Nexus, Celestia concluded with a heavy sigh, but, at the same time, I feel guilty for fearing her. Why would you feel guilty? Nexus asked. Celestia turned her back in the window. Because Nyx has done nothing to warrant such fear. I have met Nyx personally, over a short dinner, and she acted nothing like the Nightmare Moon I knew. At first, she was scared of me and my sister. She shied away, and only after some encouragement from Twilight was Nyx even able to say hello to us. Eventually Nyx drew herself out of her shell, and, after that, she laughed and spoke excitedly on many topics. She spoke of friends, spoke of school, spoke of things a normal filly her age would want to talk about, things Nightmare Moon would never care about. And thus I am torn, Princess Celestia explained. I worry about what Nyx might become, but I wonder if she is different than Nightmare Moon. She is the product of that spell, and yet she acts like any normal filly. That spell Nexus, is what is troubling me. It would trouble any pony, Nexus said, faking concern. I am honored you would come to speak with me about this, but, I must ask, what does Princess Luna think of her? Certainly she, who was once Nightmare Moon, would be able to judge Nyx's true nature. I must confess, I have been doing everything in my power to keep this a secret from Luna, Princess Celestia said, her words burdened with guilt. It has not been easy. She was able to sense the same surge of magic I felt rise up from the Everfree forest some time ago. By some stroke of luck I've been able to convince her it was nothing to worry about and have kept the rest of what I've told you hidden. Nexus frowned. I find it strange you would want to keep this a secret from Luna. Do you not trust her with this matter? No, I do trust her, but I choose to keep this a secret to protect her, Princess Celestia admitted. Call me a fool if you wish, Nexus, but I'm Luna's big sister. I lost her once to Nightmare Moon, and I don't want her getting anywhere near this. This is why I've come to you, Princess Celestia continued as she moved away from the window, retaking her seat next to him. Because, while I cannot turn to Luna in this, I need somebody to talk to. I need somebody to give me an honest opinion. Am I wrong to fear Nyx? Am I wrong to doubt in my student's ability to judge character? Assuming Twilight has noticed the similarities between Nyx and Nightmare Moon, would she not have come to me if she felt Nyx was a danger? And, even if Nyx grows to be the same in body and power, could she not be her own mare? Or, do my dreams tell me the simple truth? That, in time, Nyx will become the only mare in the world I truly fear. Silence fell upon the study as Nexus slowly took his gaze off of the princess. He closed his eyes and swirled his glass. He tried to make it look like he was pondering the question, but, in truth, he was considering the situation as a whole. Princess Celestia saw there was a chance the filly was a threat to Equestria, but did not act because of her feelings. An alicorn of her power and stature, hesitating because of her bleeding, tender heart. He'd pity the princess if her weakness wasn't so pathetic. Above that, the thought of Nightmare Moon's return scared her. She feared having to face Equestria's true queen, and for good reason. Nightmare Moon would be a much greater threat without Princess Luna's feelings holding her back. Indecision, compassion, and fear, all weaknesses that only proved to Nexus that Princess Celestia wasn't fit to rule Equestria. Only the cold wisdom of Nightmare Moon would ensure the kingdom's future. Yet, these weaknesses were not without their purpose. Nexus took a sip of orange juice, using it to hide the smile that was trying to creep onto his lips. Only once he was able to force the smile away did he lower the glass and begin to speak. You are not wrong to fear Nyx. It is your job as a ruler of this kingdom to try and foresee anything that would arise to threaten Equestria. Right now, Nyx is a credible threat. Nightmare Moon is among the worst things to happen to Equestria in recorded history, and, if there is even a small chance Nyx could become her, then she is a threat you should take seriously. But I cannot condemn Nyx for what she might do, just as I cannot punish a normal pony for a crime they have not yet committed, Celestia argued. Not only would that go against equestrian law, Twilight would never forgive me. Your concern for your student is heartwarming, Princess Celestia, but I shouldn't need to remind you that you have a whole kingdom to worry about. Is it not better to save every pony in Equestria from the danger that is Nightmare Moon, even if it means one particular unicorn doesn't like you anymore? It is better, Nexus, the princess admitted reluctantly, and perhaps, if I were a stronger mare, I could do what is best for the kingdom without batting an eye. I, however, cannot, and will not, act against Nyx unless more evidence becomes available, even if it means I must endure sleepless nights. Then maybe I can offer that evidence, Nexus replied, smiling gently. And how would you do that? Nexus turned his head, looking across the many books tucked away on the study's shelves. If I remember correctly, there is a magical ritual from the zebra homelands that may just be the answer to this predicament. With a delicate touch, he levitated a book from the shelves and cracked it open. He flicked through the pages, not truly reading the words but doing it more for appearances. He continued to turn pages for several moments before finally settling on a spot deep within the tome. Yes. It would take time to study it, even longer to prepare, but, if the spell works, you will be able to take a glimpse inside Nyx's mind. From that glimpse, you should be able to see whether or not the filly is somebody you need to fear. Celestia smiled as the weights of fear and doubt began to lift off her chest. Spell Nexus, do you honestly believe you can prepare this spell? Can you promise that this spell will do as you say? I don't know if I can outright promise, but I am very certain, he replied with a confident grin. Then please, coordinate your efforts on the spell within the palace. I will make arrangements so that anything and everything you will need to perform this spell is provided, Princess Celestia said as she crossed the room and approached him. Do whatever it takes to get this spell prepared as quickly as possible. Nexus bowed respectfully. It would be my pleasure to do so, Princess, but I should warn you of something. If I remember correctly, Nyx will need to be present. This isn't something that can be done unless she's at least in the same room. Nyx would need to be brought to the spell, taken from Twilight. The smile that had only just made its way onto Princess Celestia's face vanished, replaced by a frown. For a moment, she sat in silence, contemplating the one catch to her and Nexus' newly hatched plan. Nyx would need to be taken from Twilight Sparkle. The princess asked, as if hoping she had misheard. Yes, Nexus stated coldly. I would strongly suggest Nyx is brought here while Twilight is left in Ponyville. But couldn't Twilight accompany her? Princess Celestia asked. Would they truly need to be separated? I believe so, Nexus answered, a heavy tone of regret in his voice. I think it would be unwise to have such a magically talented unicorn present for the test. While you easily outclass Twilight with your power, she could do something regrettable before you could stop her if she feels we're harming Nyx. Even if Twilight managed to control herself, watching Nyx be tested would be difficult for her. Nexus sighed and scratched his forehead. To put it simply, Princess, do you really want to put Twilight through something like that? Do you want to have her there, to watch the test, knowing what it could reveal? Personally, I feel Twilight's presence at the spell would only cause more trouble for us and more heartache for her, especially if she is as attached to Nyx as you suggest. I must strongly advise that Twilight remains in Ponyville. Then that shall be my part in this, Princess Celestia said in defeat, her heart once again heavy in her chest. Spell Nexus, I would ask you to simply focus on preparing the spell. I will handle the task of fetching Nyx personally. Are you sure? The princess nodded. Twilight deserves as much. Nexus snapped the book shut and placed it on his desk before smiling reassuringly to Princess Celestia. Very well. I will begin preparations in the morning. I will need time to study the spell, and then I will need time to gather the materials and prepare. Once the spell is ready, however, I will inform you so that you can perform your part. After that, it will take but a few minutes to know whether or not Nyx poses a threat to Equestria. Thank you, Nexus, Princess Celestia said, managing a weak, half-hearted smile. You have been of greater service this evening than I could have hoped for. Nexus offered a short bow as a playful smile pulled at his lips. Do give me some credit, Princess. My special talent is, after all, creating and understanding complex spells. Oh, I haven't forgotten. After all, it wasn't so long ago that you were one of my faithful students, Princess Celestia teased with her usual, playful tone. Now, I believe I've taken up enough of your evening. I shall return to the castle to get some rest, but please send word to me when you are ready to begin preparing the spell. Also, do not share our conversation here with more ponies than necessary. I do not want to burden Luna with this, and I do not want to cause a public panic about Nightmare Moon's return. Of course, Princess, Nexus replied. He got out of his chair and walked with the princess to the door of his study. I will keep what we discussed here a secret to all but those who need to know about it. I hope you have a pleasant evening. Good night to you as well, spell Nexus, Princess Celestia said. Nexus returned the farewell with a wave of his hoof as the princess slipped out the study doors. He waited until she rounded a corner further down the hall before he pulled the doors shut and moved to the far side of his study. With a gentle smile, he looked out the window and watched as the princess entered the courtyard and boarded her chariot. He even waved briefly as the chariot departed. It was only when Princess Celestia was out of sight that Nexus allowed his slate gray eyes to return to the turquoise color that marked him as a member of the Children of Nightmare. His gentle grin turned menacing, and he had to fight the urge to laugh out loud. Horn glowing, Nexus began pulling books off his study shelves. Yes, he would need time to prepare, but now he had all the time he would need. He had no fear of the princess acting, for she was waiting for him to help her act. He had even convinced her to keep Twilight in Ponyville, which would make things much easier for him. A second opportunity, he had been given a second chance to complete the spell, and it had been laid in his hooves by none other than the Sun Tyrant herself. Fate and destiny were on his side. The world itself worked to help him bring back Equestria's true queen. Celestia, you have become a contributing architect in your own demise, Nexus whispered before diving into the work that lay ahead of him. Questions, comments, concerns. pen.stroke.pony@gmail.com. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Copyright Hasbro. I do not own the intellectual properties this fan fiction is based on. Click here for the Past Sins version archive.